What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto woke up with his wife's sister over his bed? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments, and also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. Naruto's eyes opened at an incredible speed. The sunlight poured through the windows and coated her room with an uncomfortable amount of sunlight. She had to shield her eyes from the shine off of her lamp. Groaning, she sat up in her bed and looked around, her eyes immediately glancing towards their sleek digital clock. 11. Fuck, we're late. Naruto's hands moved to her mouth instantly and looked down at the bottom bunk. And there Naruto lay, sleeping like a rock. Like his twin sister didn't just yell like someone was about to murder her. Sighing, Naruto jumped down from her bunk bed, grabbed her towel off a chair in the corner, and made her way over to the bathroom. Quickly, showering, Naruto slipped on her favorite red, midriff-length jacket, a black shirt and a skirt and leggings combo. What to do now? Naruto obviously isn't going to wake up that easily. But, I have to try at least. After shaking her brother multiple times, Naruto was sure that he would be waking up soon. Obviously she was wrong. The blonde sighed loudly and walked away from the bed. She took a couple of steps back and observed her twin. They both had the same bright golden locks, though Naruto's was obviously better. Their eyes, while both blue, were different shades of blue. Naruto's was baby blue and Naruto's were electric blue. Seeing that there would be no other way, Naruto bit her lip. Her tactics weren't working, and they usually did. Well, to Sakurai they did. Then again, her pink-haired teammate was a light sleeper. A smile forms on her face. It's gone almost immediately though, as Naruto focuses on the task at hand. Waking up her extremely heavy sleeper of a brother. Dude, wake up already, she practically yelled. Naruto rolled over and mumbled something in his sleep. A couple more minutes, babe. Babe? Shaking away the disturbing thought, Naruto was glad that she was finally getting some progress. Albeit very little, but at least it's progress. This is why we need another alarm clock. As soon as the thought appeared in her mind, Naruto shook it off. That wouldn't work, considering how many of those they chewed through in a single week. She looked around the room for ideas that would wake her brother up. Their room was almost as big as their classroom when the two of them were still in the academy. It was dominated by their king-sized bunk bed, with its elegantly crafted and giant wooden frame. Her velvet sheets were perfectly organized while his were strewn about. Then again, she was awake and he was asleep. To her right was giant, full-length mirror. Adjacent to it was their wardrobe and to its side was a mini fridge. Maybe it had some leftover ramen in it. No. Naruto refused to put any of the sacred food in there, for fear that his twin's dango stash would taint his ramen. With a loud sigh, Naruto turned around and entered their seldom-used bathroom. Turning the water on, Naruto splashed her face, in hopes that the cold water would give her an idea. It didn't. Walking out, she was considering using that tactic. All of her other siblings agreed to only use it when there was no other way. And from the looks of it, there's no other way but to use it. Yo, Naruto. If you don't wake up, Kenji and Tsugumi will have eaten all of the remaining ramen. As soon as those words left her mouth, Naruto was up and awake, with his eyes wide as plates. You are an evil, evil person. And with those words he got up. Quickly grabbing his towel, Naruto entered his bathroom and turned on the water. Gah, you used all the hot water. His sister's laughter could be heard all the way inside the closed-off room. After a very quick 2-minute shower, the door to the bathroom slammed open and out came Naruto struggling to put his pants on, and with his shirt backwards. You look so hot right now. Naruto shot a quick glare at his sister and fixed his shirt, before putting his pants on. Correctly. That's not something a guy wants to hear from his sister. Especially his twin. Bah, details. Anyways, why'd you wake me up so early? Early? It's 11. I'll be surprised if we aren't late for the team meeting. With one final smoothing of his shirt, Naruto finished up his look. Look at it this way, we won't be later than Kakashi-sensei. Naruto could feel her left eye twitching. The meeting was supposed to start at 8. Okay, so we'll be just as late as Kakashi-sensei. Just hurry up. Naruto left the room hastily, her boots squeaking against the hardwood floor of their home. She could hear the door close behind her, as well as her brother's grumbling stomach. I hope there's no breakfast left. Naruto couldn't help but grin at that statement. Harsh. Specifically ramen. Okay, you just crossed the line. The sound of their feet on wood could be heard all the way downstairs. Their mother Kushina smiled and laid out the final bowl of ramen. It would be the 23rd bowl of the morning. Seems like a lot, doesn't it? Not if you live in a house full of Uzumaki. Ohio. Naruto's voice called out. Then came Naruto's quieter and more subdued voice. Kushina couldn't help but look proud at her children. They looked gorgeous. Naruto still wore that big red jacket that was way too big for her at one time. Now it fit her perfectly and even showed off her now visible curves. Along with the short skirt thigh-high leggings combo, Kushina was sure her daughter would attract boys. If not for the fact that she already has a boyfriend. What's for breakfast? Then there was Sun, wearing the same short-sleeved red hoodie that he wore every day. If it weren't for the fact that she knew he had duplicates, Kushina would start pushing her son to start wearing different stuff. Like his sister, he surely attracted girls and maybe even some boys to himself. Though she was sure that Sayoko would chase them off and threaten to kill them for looking at her brother's best friend in total not crush before vehemently denying that she did it for him. Shaking off her ramblings, Kushina handed her son and daughter a pair of chopsticks each. Here ya go. It's the usual. Ramen. Naruto frowned. But we have ramen for breakfast like every day. Both mother and son looked at Naruto like she was Madara Uchiha reborn. Is that a bad thing? Naruto shook her head rapidly. Thought so. Naruto felt a shiver go down her spine. When it came to ramen, some of her family members sure could get scary. Speaking of which, you gonna eat that? Naruto asked, nodding his head in the direction in which her bowl sat, untouched. The twin-tailed blonde shook her head. More for me then, he quickly and greedily declared. Just hurry up, Imouto-chan. At that, Naruto stopped to give her a strange look. Okay, there are two things wrong with that statement. First off, I'm not a girl, and secondly, I was born 10 minutes earlier than you. Right, Mom? Kushina shook her head vigorously, too engrossed in her own bowl of ramen to care. Who cares? Just hurry up or we'll be even later. Can you two be any louder? A disgruntled and throaty voice cried out. Naruto turned her head towards the door and saw her older brother leaning against the doorway, with a murderous glare fixated on Naruto. I thought you were sleeping. On the couch. Not really the best place to sleep, you know. Kushina stood up and filled herself up a glass of cold water. I was. Then the brats came downstairs in the most obnoxious way possible. Naruto snorted. Even worse than when you come home after a night of partying, Kenji? Her brother then turned his glare onto her. And your point? I at least try to be quiet. And you're doing such a fantastic job of it. Her twin couldn't help but snicker at that. She got you there, bro. Kenji seemed content to continue glaring at the twins. Naruto's ears perked up when the sound of footsteps approaching reached them. Looking to her right was one of their older sisters, Tsugumi. Her long red hair, unkempt and unruly, going all over the place. She was still in her pajamas as well. What's up, squirts? Kenji. She strode towards them. I heard screaming, and seeing as how short, pale and grumpy is here, I assume it has something to do with his beauty sleep? Kenji's face twisted in anger as his brow began to twitch. Short? I am not short. Tsugumi snorted and strolled forward and plucked Naruto's second bowl of ramen from his hands. Compared to me, you're short. That doesn't count because you're older than me and thus, have had more time to grow. You're 18. You should have reached your peak height by now. She then turned to the two twins. You two best get going now. Don't want to keep the pervert waiting, do you? She pretended to think before opening her mouth once more. Then again, aren't all men who've been in contact with Jiraiya-sama perverts? Don't generalize us. Yeah, you're on a category of your own, Kenji. The twins turned to each other, with utterly confused looks on their face. Did Tsugumi just compliment Kenji? Naruto shivered and ran over to the door and began to put her sandals on. Her twin looked back at their older siblings in fear. Wait for me. Don't leave me with these demons. He frantically shoveled noodles into his mouth before stumbling over to his sandals. The older siblings and their mother looked on with amusement as the two twins scrambled out of the Namikaze mansion. You know, I'm surprised Arashi still hasn't promoted them to Jonin by now. Or at least Chunin, you know. Kenji turned to Tsugumi with a look. You know Arashi doesn't do that shit. He promotes people based on their merits, not their relations and bloodlines. Then again, a civilian like you wouldn't know that. Bastard. I may not be a shinobi like you, but I'm still pretty strong. Kenji smirked. I never said you weren't strong, just that a civilian like you. Oh my god. Shut up. Kenji shrugged. Fine, you don't deserve to hear my magnificent voice anyway. Who would want to listen to a voice that always sounds as if it's going to murder them in their sleep, and then eat their puppies? At least I'm not a 22-year-old still living with their parents. You're 18. Kenji raised his finger, mouth open and ready to make a snarky comeback. Until he started to think about it all. You have a good point. Training Field 7. With a loud sigh, Sayoko Uchiha looked around the field, scanning for the Namikaze twins. Looking down at her scroll, she narrows her eyes. Has she read this before? Yep. These are the instructions for the Shadow Shuriken Jutsu. Another loud sigh escapes her lips. Snickering. Sayoko could hear someone snickering. Turning her head, Sasuke's twin sees the pink-haired medic peeking out from behind a tree just a few feet away. What do you want, Sakurai? I have things to do. The pink-haired boy waved and walked forward towards her with an apple in hand. Are you eating an apple so you look more like an asshole? Sayoko let a grin form on her face. Oh har har, very funny. What I'm wondering is, what are your thoughts on this whole village's disappearing business? Ah yes. For the last year or so, settlements all throughout the continent were more or less being sacked. Now this is a fairly normal occasion. And this would be considered pretty normal, if not for the fact that there is a pattern. Every month or so, a village that has had fairly close ties with the Leaf has just disappeared off the map. Sayoko tilted her head slightly to side. It's probably nothing we can't handle. Though the fact that one of the many leaf-tied villages was home to a bunch of Uchiha who had left the village years ago, didn't exactly give her a good night's sleep. Team 7's medic smiled at her and rubbed the back of his head. You think so, huh? I suppose you're right. I mean, as long Arashi-sama is here anyways. The Uchiha returned the gesture. Yeah, I mean nothing can be worse than the Kyuubi attack or the Kagaya incident, right? She let out a deep sigh and let her head rest on her hand. You know, if you keep sighing like that, I'll be forced to believe that you're hopelessly in love with our leader. Shooting a glare across to her teammate did little to stifle his laughter. Why do people keep saying that? Sakurai let a bewildered look onto his face. Because it's true. It is not. And so help me, I will castrate you if you bring it up one more time. Calm down, Sayoko. Teasing my sister is my job though, Sakurai, not yours. Sasuke speaks up from his seat beside the riverbed. In his hands is his katana, which he promptly takes a quick glance at. Damn, a scratch. He mutters under his breath. Well, you're gonna have some competition when Naruto eventually moves in with you when they get married. Sakurai leaned back and looked away from Sayoko's murderous glare, which was burning holes into the side of his head. His raven-haired teammate raised an eyebrow at the statement. Who says he's gonna go and live with us? If anything, they'll move out so there would actually be some peace and quiet. Nah, that ain't his style. He's more likely to leave the village in search of adventure. Sasuke looked up and thought about it before shaking his head. No, leaving the village in search of adventure is something I'm more likely to do than Naruto. Sayoko looked at her two teammates with a mortified look as they continued to discuss her non-existent post-marriage life. Please stop. From his perch, Kakashi looked down at his students with an amused smile on his face. It reminded him of his old team. Except for the fact that there were only 3 members on his team compared to his 5 students. Bringing his head up, Kakashi spotted the last 2 members of his unique 6-man squad sprinting towards them. Their blonde hair sticking out like a sore thumb in the ocean of green and brown and blue that was the wilderness. Jumping down from his lookout, Kakashi whistled, his little students turning to look at him. All right team, calm down. I have spotted our 2 teammates from my perch of innocence. They should be here very, very soon. His cute little students looked at each other. He named it? Sasuke whispered to Sayoko, who held a hand to her mouth, which did little to cover up her laughter. The pink-haired medic of the group merely raised his eyebrow. Perch of innocence, my ass. Sakurai stated, his face blank. Ah, you wound me greatly, Sakura-chan. Sakurai's eye twitched in annoyance as Kakashi's trademark eye smile made its way onto his face. First off, I may have pink hair, but that doesn't mean I'm a girl, and secondly I hate cherry blossoms. Said medic shot back at his sensei, who merely waved him off and pointed out to the hill where their remaining teammates were. Naruto grinned and waved at her best friend. Sayoko-chan, I have tell you something. The two girls ran off to the side where the boys wouldn't be able to hear them even with their enhanced hearing. "What's up guys, what you are wearing?" Naruto screamed in fake terror and hid behind his pink-haired medic and cowered in pretend fear. Sasuke looked down at his outfit. A black long-sleeved and high-collared shirt with the Uchiha fan on the back and a pair of black shorts with his legs taped up. "What's wrong with this?" Naruto peeked out from Sakurai's shoulders and screamed. "Don't you mean what isn't wrong with it?" Of course, Naruto was simply overreacting. "Anyways, why so late?" Sakurai asked, shoving the other boy away from his personal space bubble. "And don't tell me there was no ramen to eat. Or do I need to remind you that your family owns an entire warehouse full of ramen ingredients, thus making it impossible to run out of said ramen? I just overslept, ow. The hell man?" The blonde rubbed the now red and throbbing spot on his cheek. He glared at the other boy. "That is because you are heaviest sleeper in the entire fucking village, unless ramen is involved." Sasuke piped up from behind the two who ignored him and continued to argue like a bunch of brats. "How dare you? It is a family tradition to have at least one bowl of ramen with every meal. That's not healthy, you know." Naruto cried out as she and Sayoko approached, the latter with a very noticeable and prominent blush on her cheeks. "It's fine to have it once a day, but to have it every meal? That doesn't seem right. And don't even get me started on the fact that you have at least 4 bowls every meal." "Well, that's because I'm a growing boy." Kakashi decided to voice his opinion as well. "I'm surprised you aren't diabetic. Then again, with how much of a training freak you are, I'm not surprised." He then corralled his team into a small semicircle on the grass in front of him. "Anyways, time to brief you on the mission. You took a mission without asking us first?" The male Uchiha raised his brow in disbelief. "Wait, I thought this meeting was about the Chunin exams." Sakurai sounded really confused for some reason. "Well, your little sister lied to you to get your lazy ass here," Kakashi exclaimed cheerfully. "As I was saying before I was interrupted. But I don't have sister, right?" "Of course you do. It's Sakura, right? Your identical twin sister who looks like a female version of thou." Kakashi answered, wiggling his visible eyebrow at Sakurai, who looked like he was questioning life itself. "Wait just a minute. Sasuke told me the same thing." Sayoko pointed an accusing finger at her twin, who stared back with his trademark blank face. "He did, but I'm not stupid, I've heard the news." "What news?" the other set of twins and Sakurai asked out loud. "That because of the outbreak of civil war in Kumogakure, the exam won't be held there anymore and it's been postponed so that a new host village can be chosen." Sasuke then shot a look at his sensei. "Let me guess, our mission is to try and rig the process so that Konoha is chosen?" Peeved. "Not even close. What you've said is correct though, except for the part about rigging the choosing. No, in fact our mission is pretty simple. Raid a nearby bandit camp and remove their presence from the area." Kakashi had an uncharacteristic moment of uncontrollable laughter. Naruto fist pumped the air. "Yes, an easy mission." His twins thought were quite the opposite. "Ah." Sakurai smiled, stood up and started to make his way back to his house. "Sounds easy then. I'll see you guys at the gate." Kakashi looked around at his remaining students. "Alright, dismissed? Meet at the main gate in an hour or so." The body flicker's signature puff of smoke and swirling leaves then were what became of the Cyclops. 4 hours later, Sakurai looked at his cards with a melancholy expression, his eyes glazed over them. An 8 of spades and a 9 of hearts. He looked up at his opponent with trepidation. Then he spoke up. "I win." Kakashi merely smiled and revealed his pair of cards, a queen of hearts and a 9 of diamonds. "Really? Black Jack, can you guys get over here?" They turned their attention to an irate Naruto who had her hands on her hips. "Alright then, Sasuke, report," Kakashi called out as he scanned the scene that lay before him. It was a bandit camp, all right. Hard to tell, due to the level of organization there was from simply looking at the layout. It was also bigger than expected. The camp is divided into 4 sections. The top right seems to be the medical area, bottom right is the armory. The section next to it is probably the mess hall and the one above it are definitely the sleeping quarters. Sasuke's eyes drift to a group of bandits training. They look well trained and well equipped compared to normal bandits. Don't forget well organized. Anything else? A smirk made its way onto Sasuke's normally blank face. Only one. They only have one exit. What for? I have no clue. It's probably only big enough for their supply carts to fit through. For a well-organized camp, that detail was certainly overlooked. Kakashi looked at his students as they lined up to either side of him with eager expressions. All right, here's the plan. A confused look made its way onto Naruto's face. Plan? We don't need a plan. Better safe than sorry. Besides, my plan will cut the mission time in half. That lit up Naruto's eyes. Well, what's the plan then? Hammer and anvil. The hammer will be made of Sasuke, Sakurai and Naruto, who will force the bandits to try and flee through their one and only exit. The anvil will be made of Sayoko and Naruto. I will set up a bit farther back and take out any stragglers who somehow manage to escape. Is that clear? Yes, sir. Soda Mashiro didn't like this. What was so important about the box anyways? But he couldn't open it. Not if he wanted to risk killing himself and all of men. His employer was no ordinary man. The bandit leader had been around many powerful shinobi before, yet none of them excreted darkness like this one. Looking across from him, he met those accursed demonic eyes. Are we clear, Soda? The bandit leader nodded. The cloth door flapped. Soda let out a breath that he wasn't aware he was holding in. That man, if he could even be called that, was not someone to be trifled with. Soda realized with shame that his hands were trembling. The very same hands that had murdered many, were now shaking with fear. The wooden box that he was supposed to be protecting wasn't even that important looking, except for its impressively detailed figurehead, which was handcrafted by the finest woodworkers. Topping it off was a golden lid which shone abnormally bright. His two best men, Noburo and Rai, were currently guarding the aforementioned chest. A frown made its way onto Soda's scarred and more than always smug-looking face. The issue of what was in the box just wouldn't leave his mind. Soda had to know, and he would get to the bottom of it no matter what. Haruto Mori was simply doing his job, sharpening and cleaning all the spare swords in the armory, when he noticed that a shadow was following him around. Turning around, the red-haired bandit caught a glimpse of a figure rushing past the corner of one of the tents. Stop fucking around, Asayuki. Get back to, oh god. Haruto simply wasn't prepared for what he would see when he turned the corner. He certainly wasn't prepared to see his partner hanging from a stack of crates by his own guts, which were spilling out. But that wasn't all, as the bandit quartermaster noticed that the legs of his fellow bandit were attached by nothing more than strands of muscle. Haruto then felt a sharp stabbing pain in his lower back before collapsing and falling face first onto a puddle of blood. What the hell? He opened his mouth to scream, but nothing came out as a kunai penetrated his neck and ripped right through his vocal cords. The last thing Haruto saw before he died was a foot. Said foot would smash his head into a million pieces and spread blood and gray matter all over the place. Naruto watched his teammate work with a grimace. Sasuke returned to their hiding spot, wiping the blood and brain matter off of his clothing. Their medic of a teammate then came jogging up to them. Explosive said, "We should probably move back a bit," he stated, fiddling around with a small detonator. His hands too were covered in blood and guts. Literally. Alright, Soda had no idea what was going on. One minute he dealing with his monster of an employer, and then the next a massive fireball spread throughout his camp. He was currently walking to the where the chest was held in hopes that it was safe. Oi, Noburo. Rai, is the box safe? Shit. A figure stood in a dark corner of the tent. Strewn around him were the bodies of Noburo and Rai as well as a few others. The figure stepped out of the shadows, with a dark and malicious aura shrouding his hand. It seems that your services are no longer needed, Soda-san. It's nothing personal, it's just that we need to clear cap space for some new and better talent in the free agent market. A wave of killing intent so powerful and suffocating filled the room, brining Soda down to his knees. The amount of killing intent was more than that of Yagura when the Seven Swordsmen rebelled. Yes, that's exactly what you'll have to do to get your contract extension. Get on your knees and beg. Soda looked on with fear as his employer got closer and closer. Don't worry, I'm not gonna kill you. I'm just going to fuck you up. Really, really, bad, and maybe some more. Soda didn't even have a chance to scream before the hand cut through his body like a hot knife through butter. Naruto ducked under a wild katana swing and then ran his entire fist and arm through the bandit's chest. Quickly ripping his arm out of the hole it created, the blonde swiftly deflected away another wild and sloppy attempt to attack him. Before he could counter though, the bandit's head flew from the body. A very familiar sound made its way to his ears. The sound of a sword being sheathed. Stop stealing my kills, man. Sasuke simply smirked and flicked his wrist. A kunai flew out and over Naruto's shoulder and right between a bandit's eyes. Then stop talking and get on to killing. A loud rumble made its way to their ears as the ground collapsed beneath a whole row of tents, killing all inside. Through the dust and debris was Sakurai's pink hair that could be seen all the way from the moon. He was cracking his knuckles. Sasuke, where's their boss? I think I saw their command tent, or what appeared to be their command tent, but no one was in there. The Uchiha activated his Sharingan and scanned the area once more. He made a noise that can only be called pure frustration. There's no one that seems to be of importance because these guys are bandits. And besides, it doesn't matter. Naruto left the two to their own devices as he deftly dodged another strike aimed at him. He then wrapped his arms around his attacker's waist and lifted and threw the bandit over his shoulder. A loud crash could be heard. The blonde sidestepped a jab and then shattered the bandit's blade before clotheslining the man's head clean off the body. I think we should. Something feels off. His raven-haired teammate came up beside him. You're talking about that massive wave of killing intent we sensed earlier, right? Naruto gave a nod. All right, I'll try to find some way to determine who their leader was. Sasuke's eyes then darted to the right and he spun to right and dodged a lunging bandit who received a fistful of Sakurai's hand. Enough dilly-dallying and get back to work. Both Sasuke and Naruto scoffed. Who made cotton candy here the boss? Naruto leaned her body 45 degrees to left and dodged the attack aimed at her. The blonde female clenched her fist, cocked it back and sent it flying into the man's nose. The sound of the ligaments in his nose breaking was pretty audible. Moving on to her next target, Naruto lowered her body and slammed her balled fist into the bandit's lower back. A loud crack signaled the breaking of his spine. Naruto lowered her head as the bandit's head flew of the body. Standing in front of her was her best friend. You know, if you used a katana instead of a wakizashi I'd have thought you were your brother. Seriously, if Sayoko's hair was shorter, you'd have thought that they were identical twins. But I'm obviously the better looking one, right? Slit throat. If I were a lesbian, yeah. Add another bandit that won't be able to walk again. Are you implying something there, Naruto? The two burst out in laughter. Naruto bent her back and was basically parallel to the ground and dodged a very close swing. She eyed the bandit in front of her like a lion stalking its prey. The bandit ran forward and let out a roar. The blonde went side to side, ducked under the slash and threw a chakra-enhanced right hook. The bandit's head exploded like a balloon. That's 35 points for Queen Naruto. Kakashi walked past the lines of bodies on either side of him. The silence was all he needed to confirm that the mission was over, though the bodies sure did help. He stopped at the center of the camp where Sakurai was sitting down on a log trying to explain something to Naruto and Sasuke. I'm telling you, whoever did that to him obviously knew what he was doing, otherwise he wouldn't be alive. Sakurai grabbed a towel and wiped his bloody hands. I still don't get it. Why would his own men try to kill him? Other than the fact that he could have been asshole. The blonde's brows were furrowed as his forehead scrunched up. What do you think, Sasuke? The person who did this couldn't have been one of the bandits. No matter how well trained, organized or equipped they are. Even if they did, based on Sakurai's diagnosis, it's safe to say that whoever did this has tremendous control over their chakra. Kakashi sneaked past them and entered the bloody tent behind the clueless trio. Something was off. The tent was leaking a very volatile chakra signature. The tent was fairly spacious. In the center was a table, probably used as the strategy table. However, the body lying on top of it wouldn't have indicated otherwise. He was a tall and rugged man, with many scars on his face and torso. There was a massive scar just above his heart. It appeared to be fresh. Kakashi's face lit up in recognition. The Jonin's left hand quickly unbuttoned one of the flaps of his flak jacket and pulled out a small scroll. He quickly unfurled it and sealed the body inside. Picking up a chunk of wood lying on the floor, Kakashi placed it in the center of the table and transformed it into the man that lay there previously. Kakashi-sensei? What are you doing? Naruto's voice called out. Kakashi turned to look at his student. A bead of sweat dripped down his forehead as he eyed the body. Finishing the job. Naruto's eyes widened, but he could have had valuable intel. On what? Naruto remained quiet, despite his mouth opening and closing repeatedly. You think this man has a connection to the village sackings? Is that what you're trying to say? Don't be stupid. We aren't here to gather information on anything. We're here to clear out a bandit infestation that could have potentially grown to be a thorn in our side. Besides, there isn't anything you should be worried about, aside from the Chunin exams. But nothing. As your commanding officer, I order you to forget about this nonsense. Do you understand? Naruto flinched, despite Kakashi's calm, yet stern voice. Yes, sir. He mumbled quietly. He then looked at Kakashi with a fire in his eyes. But that doesn't mean I like it. Hokage's office, Konoha. Minato Namikaze let his head drop onto his mahogany desk. To his left side was an enormous pile of papers that were stacked dangerously high. To his right was a bowl of ramen. The day had been unbelievably boring, tedious and tiring. As were most days. Thank God Himiko offered to take off some his workload. The blonde Hokage groaned into his desk as the sound of someone knocking reached his eardrums. Come in. He slowly lifted his head to see who was there. Minato quickly wiped the exhausted look of his face and straightened his back out. The door opened slowly and soon Team 7 spilled in. Kakashi came in first with his usual eye smile. Next came his two children, the twins Naruto and Naruko. After them were the Uchiha twins. But someone was missing. Where's Sakurai? Some family troubles. Naruko eyed Kakashi with an angry glare. Hey, it's not my fault he believed me when I told him he had a sister. Despite the fact that he doesn't. Minato held up his hand. You know what? I don't want to know. What I do want to know is, how did the mission go? Everything went as they would usually. The bandits, however, were much better organized and equipped than we had anticipated. Minato caught a subtle little gesture from his former student. It was subtle enough that the rest of Team 7 didn't notice. Alright, I'm expecting your written report to be on time, Kakashi. Finally, time for some ramen. Naruto cried out, scrambling out of the room. I'm going to go and make sure he doesn't eat all of Ichiraku's ramen for a fourth time. Naruko called out, see ya out home, dad. And where are you going, Sayoko? Said girl's brother gripped her by the shoulder, stopping her from leaping out the window. Nothing? I mean nowhere. Yeah, sure. Let's go get some ramen. Well, what are you waiting for? Let's go. Wait, don't pull on my arm so hard you know what happened the last time you did this. Sasuke called out as his sister dragged him out by the hand. Minato looked around the room. You can come out now, Arashi. Both the copycat and the yellow flash turned their gazes to a dark and solitary corner. A man walked out. His blonde hair was swept to the side. Cold and calculating blue eyes scanned Kakashi like a pack of wolves sizing up their prey. He wore a black jumpsuit underneath a black Anbu flak jacket with black gauntlets with a golden trim. Finishing off his outfit was a white hooded cloak that reached below the knees. Arashi made his way over to his father's desk and sat down in on top. You couldn't retrieve the package, I see. The gears inside Arashi's head began to turn. That means that those bandits were stupid enough to open it. No, he was there. I sensed his killing intent. Kakashi interjected. Then that means that he's recovered the only solution we have. Damn it, Arashi snarled. Kakashi then fished around in his pockets and pulled out a scroll. However, not all is lost. I've sealed away one of his underlings. He seems to be the leader of those bandits. He explained, unsealing the man. Arashi's eyes narrowed. Anbu, take this man to T&I. Get him a room with Kazuma. He turned to Kakashi and smiled, good job. Kakashi stepped back and away from the man as several masked men dropped down from the rafters. Now anyways, on to more pressing matters. We've gotten Menma's latest report, Minato said, pulling out a file from one of his desk's many drawers. Kakashi flipped through it. Another village? Yes, Suzaku Town, a major trade port and one of the biggest importers of Konoha products. We just found out 3 hours ago. Minato continued on. Now, I want you to take a look at this map. Kakashi dropped the report about the village on the edge of the desk. He looked at the map intently. His visible eye then widened and shot his head up to look at his former teacher. This is. Naruto clutched his stomach with a groan. Next to him Naruko, with an annoyed grimace dominating her features, held him up by the armpits. I told you eating that 23rd bowl was a bad idea. Naruko chastised. She helped ease her brother onto a bench outside Himiko's office. You're lucky it's only a stomachache and not a ruptured stomach. Is that even possible? Actually it is. It happens when your stomach is filled with too much food, 5 liters or so, and don't expunge it all out. Then all of that mass gets pushed to the side, causing your stomach to rupture. A smile formed on the twins' faces as Himiko came up to them. Himiko was the twin of Kenji. Though her blonde hair would not have given it away, considering her twin's fiery red. Himiko had her blonde hair tied into a braid. She was wearing the standard Konoha Jonin uniform, excluding the vest. The navy blue shirt was also short-sleeved and high-collared. The siblings got up and soon began to make their way back home. Along the Himiko complained and whined non-stop. And then he had the gall to say that I made a mistake. The nerve of that douchebag. Fucking civilian council. Anyways, enough about my day. How'd the mission go? Naruto's stomach growled. Boring. To which Naruto nodded. Yeah, it was kind of disappointing. Well, at least you didn't have to do 300 pages of paperwork. Himiko growled out, shaking her fist at nothing. The twins looked at each other. That sounds like hell. Naruto's face and voice was completely devoid of sympathy. Their sister nodded enthusiastically at his statement. You don't even know the half of it. I have to sign immigration papers, mediate business negotiations, arbitrate contracts, and hand out missions. And don't even get me started on the amount of assholes there are. God, their assholes must be gaping huge with how long the sticks up their asses are. Sounds harsh. Like her twin, Naruto's voice was completely devoid of any emotion. Yeah, if it weren't for the fact that father would get a bigger workload and have to deal with those assholes, I would have stopped doing this a long time ago. The other two shared a look. Oh, poor you. The taller blonde sighed. At least try to sound sympathetic. Oh, your job is so hard. Poor Himiko's wrist must hurt so much. The two twins said at the same time. Himiko simply grinned. Thank you. And they do hurt. A lot. I don't know if you could tell, but we were mocking you. Oh, of course I knew that. I was simply playing along. Their clan compound soon entered their view, as the twins shared one last look. Yeah, sure. Naruto came up to their door first. He then slipped his sandals off. We're home. Yo. Sitting down on one of their living room's many couches was Arashi. He gave them a small wave. The house seemed empty. Naruto's eyes wandered to the TV and they widened to the size of dinner plates. Is that a new episode of Nightingale Beyond? Oh my god, this is the episode that Toru meets the original Nightingale. Naruto dove onto the couch with a squeal. Anyways, where is everybody? Naruto asked. Arashi looked up at his younger brother. Segumi's on a date with Sojuru, Kenji is in his room doing God knows what. Kazuma is still at work and so is dad, but they should be back by dinner. Natsumi is still on that long-term mission in Kusagakure, Kimiko is finishing up some reports and should be home in time for dinner. Yukamura's hanging at Cage's place. And mom's at the warehouse getting the ingredients for tonight's meal. He diverted his eyes to Himiko for a split second. Listen, why don't you go and help mom out? Himiko and I will go and set up the kitchen. Naruto nodded and eagerly made his way to the warehouse. The two siblings then left the fangirling Naruto alone with her Toru's abs. They made their way to the kitchen. Arashi pulled out the drawer and began to set up the kitchen. So what's on the up and up? Himiko asked, laying down a pair of knives next to the cutting board. This has something to do with Menma's report, right? Arashi nodded. It's pretty clear that Konoha is next on the list. But we don't have to worry about that for a while. Now we have to follow that lead Menma gave us. Hopefully it's actually something. I hope so too. But are you sure that sending Team 7 out on another mission again is a smart idea? Himiko stared at her brother with worried eyes. Especially if he is there. I trust Kakashi. He's proved that he can look after our siblings. Arashi responded. But the land of the smoke is called that for a reason. I'm not sure they'll be ready for what they'll see there. Yes, that's the only thing that worries me. Menma and Saori should be here in a month or so to share what they've learned. Really? How come I didn't know about this? Don't be too surprised, we've learned it just minutes ago. Himiko's eyes narrowed. You're not really here, are you, Arashi? The clone smirked and gave a 2-finger salute. But you are going to be coming home, right? By home do you mean the house that I just recently bought for me and my fiancé? Then by that definition, yes. At this, Himiko smirked. Oh, you mean the house that's right across from us and is in the same fucking district? The two siblings shared a chuckle. Ah, Toru-sama. Your abs make my mouth water. Shut the fuck up, brat. I'm trying to get rid of a hangover here. His hand ran through his thick and rich blonde locks, as Naruto entered the room. Sitting down in a chair, across from the window, was Sasuke, a disgusted look on his face. A frown formed on Naruto's face. You see them? Sasuke looked back at him, then turned his head back out the window with a sneer on his face. TCH. Yeah, talking to a group of greens. The Uchiha's hand flew across the desk he was sitting adjacent to, and reached for a small, leather-bound, notebook. Sasuke caught the pen, which Naruto had thrown at him. To think that Iwa would actually support this kind of regime. After Onoki got assassinated, they've become even more militaristic. Both genin averted their gaze to the door, where Kakashi leaned against the blood-stained wooden doorframe. Yes, but Iwa already has one of the biggest and most powerful armies in the world. They don't need to make alliances. Sasuke retorted. Iwa was indeed a threat. Especially under their new Tsuchikage, Kosuke Tatsuka. The tension between Iwa and Konoha rose even more when reports of Iwa shinobi raiding the border reached Konoha. Because messing with Rika Akabane is suicide. Even you should know this, Sasuke. Iwa needs to make sure that Rika will stay neutral. Otherwise all other plans they have in store are rendered useless. Kakashi looked back down at his book, a special edition, Make-Out Paradise novel, signed by Jiraiya himself. A giggle escaped from his lips. Sasuke looked down at his journal. Rika Akabane. It was a name that struck fear in the hearts of even the most powerful of Kage. How? Sasuke didn't know. But, judging from the state of the country that she ran, it was clear to see that she ruled with an iron fist. Yeah, I know. So why are we here then? Kakashi sighed deeply and loudly. You're a smart boy, Sasuke. You know why we're here. So I was right then. Something about this place has a connection with those village sackings. Sasuke muttered under his breath. Naruto looked at the two and sighed. Did they forget that he was still there? With a shrug, the son of Minato strode forward and leaned out the window and instantly regretted his decision. All he could smell was the stench of death. Bodies decaying and rotting. It also smelled of people who had never taken a bath in their entire life, or the scent of someone taking a dump in their pants. Naruto's sense of smell wasn't the only thing that was completely overwhelmed by the city in front of him. The blonde could hear the shrieks of women being raped, kidnapped or murdered. The sound of flesh slapping against each other. It sickened him. Yet when they had arrived several days ago early in the morning, the people looked normal. Happy even. How? Turning back around, Naruto caught the sight of his teammate and sensei, with expectant looks. What? Did you see anyone that looks like they could be a spy or something like that? Kakashi asked, his book snapped shut for once. No, and what would that look like anyways? Also, why are you asking? Because your brother Menma has a contact in this village that may have information on the recent sackings as of late. Sasuke folded his hands behind his head and rested his feet on the table. Naruto glanced back outside. Across from them was the only building that was not rundown was Iwagakure Embassy. From the windows, two very distinct figures wearing Iwagakure Jonin uniforms were seated. Do you think that Menma's contact would even show? The silver-haired Cyclops had his book open once again. Yes. Unfortunately, our contact will be later than the arranged time period. Those Iwa Jonin arriving was an unknown variable. Naruto sat down in Sasuke's place, with the Uchiha standing and looking out over the city. Yeah, an unknown variable that we probably knew should have known was coming. The blonde shot back, a deck of cards in his hands. Silence overtook the room. What do you mean you haven't made any money? Sasuke clenched his jaw as the sound of a woman being hit reached his ears. Sobbing followed afterward. I am sorry master, and no one approached me, I'm sorry I wasn't more useful. Sorry doesn't earn me money. You stupid whore. The raven-haired ninja tightened his grip on the wood railings. And a blue such as me, cannot use a red like you as an instrument of pleasure. With each slap and punch, Sasuke's anger would rise. Kakashi looked up, sensing his student was about to do something stupid that would blow their cover. Sasuke, calm yourself. You will be no help to her. If you kill that man, his underlings will attack the girl instead, believing it was her that killed their master. That's not what you want, is it? Sasuke crumpled almost to the ground. He grit his teeth. Of course not. I just want to do something. We all want to do something, but you understand that we will just be making the situation worse, right? His best friend called out, shuffling his cards and putting them back in their case. You'll get the chance to save them later. right? He looked back to his teacher, who shrugged. Well, whatever. Just know that you aren't alone. Sasuke looked away and did the traditional Uchiha grunt. TCH. Whatever. Our informant better get here quick. I don't want to have to hear any more of this. Then close the window. The only blonde in the room called out, with a bowl of ramen now somehow in his hands. How are we going to know the informant is here then? Point. Civilians walked past Sakurai as if he wasn't there. Which was weird. You would have thought a guy with pink hair would stick out more often, but he didn't. He looked at his two teammates who were atop the hill behind him. Taking a quick look around, the medic slipped a hand into his pouch and let his fingers curl around a pair of shuriken. He shot a quick glare at the gang on the corner, who had been eyeing every woman who had walked by. As Sakurai walked past them, he could feel their gaze on his back. They then backed off when they noticed the glint of moonlight coming off the shuriken in his hand. After that they backed off, with fear-stricken, as well as hate-filled eyes. Stupid green, can't leave us alone for a fucking minute. Their murmurs filled the silent alleyway. Sakurai ignored it and continued making his way towards his teammates' post overlooking the dictator's palace. The hill, if it could be called that, had certainly felt the effects of the city's long-time struggles. Trash was strewn everywhere. The trees looked dry and their branches drooped dangerously low to the ground. Brown grass was what covered the hill. It should also be noted that the stench of dead bodies filled the air. Rika Akabane's palace, on the other hand, was anything but that. Its massive marble pillars, which were at least 15 meters tall, were coated in gold. Beyond the pillars were where the palace's fountains are, all made of solid gold. It spewed rainbow-colored water into the air. Past that lay the courtroom, which had to have been at least the size of Hokage Mountain. It was made of what seemed to be obsidian. Standing guard at the lobby was a statue that was as tall as one of the heads of the Hokages from Hokage Mountain. A snarl made its way on his face as some of the guards patrolling atop the walls of the palace deemed it necessary to take a number one on some passing plebeians, who were disturbing the peace. Sakurai soon found himself seated next to Naruto, who seemed to be intently staring at something. Next to them, leaned against a tree, Sayoko twirled around one of her kunai. What's going on? Sakurai raised a hand to his forehead and shielded his eyes from the intense moonlight. There seemed to be some commotion. The pink-haired medic squinted and saw through the huge window that the Iwanin they had spotted earlier were having a meeting with someone. He looked at Naruto. Sakurai frowned. Weren't they at the embassy earlier? You know what they're saying? Naruto nodded and recalled her familiar. A small black and red scaled dragon. What's the situation, Lady Amethyst? The blonde questioned her summon. The dragon took a breath and breathed out a small puff of flame. The Iwanin have met with the dictator known as Rika Akabane to discuss the terms of their official alliance. He looked at his master with almost longing eyes. Naruto sighed before reaching into her pocket and feeding her summon. As I was saying, they were discussing terms of the alliance, so I can assume that they had been negotiating for a while. One of the terms of the alliance is that the land hidden by the smoke may not put taxes or royalties on any Iwagakure-made substances. They have also demanded that Iwagakure shinobi will have safe passage through the country. Another one of the terms in their alliance is that their troops may not be attacked at any cost. At this, Naruto furrowed her brows. But isn't that already guaranteed by the alliance? Yes, but if the rebels were to hear about this alliance, it would be in their best interest to try and break it and get Iwagakure to attack their country. Sakurai answered. Sayoko kneeled and cut a small blade of grass off the hill. Yes, but will they pull off forces from the main rebel army to sabotage relations with Iwagakure? This is kind of a lose-lose situation for the government. I mean, the rebels will get wind of this alliance for sure and sabotage relations. On the other hand, even if they don't, they give Iwagakure ninja free passage through their country, which put Iwagakure in a good position for an invasion. But you forget, Rika Akabane is charge of this country. Iwa would be suicidal if they anger her. Sakurai retorted. It's pretty clear to Sakurai that the greens, blues and purples are too headstrong and arrogant to listen to anyone, let alone a woman. So the fact that they kneeled to her the moment she appears, is good enough reason to be wary of the person. Which is why the decision is being made. Naruto sounded like she had just found the secret to getting her brother to quit his ramen addiction. It essentially boils down to this. If I'm going to hell, then you're going down with me. It becomes silent after that. Sakurai then notices something out of the corner of his eye. He looks at his teammates. You guys see that, right? Everyone nods. Rebels? Naruto shifts her weight onto one knee as she prepares to leap over to the walls. Sakurai nods. Probably. Reminder though, if things go bad, we are not allowed to interfere. Understand? His two female teammates look at each. Who made Gumboy here in charge? Kagami Akiyama dug his fingers deep into the handhold he'd found in the wall of the palace. How a wall made of obsidian could have cracks was beyond him. The wind blows his hair into his eyes. Looking to his right, he sees Kazuya atop one of the arches. Kazuya clutches his cloak and makes sure that it doesn't make any flapping noises that could give them away. The leader of the rebels then looks to his left where Yukihara's snow-white hair that pierces the heavens, as Ryusei would say, shines in the moonlight. Though she is doing her best to hide it with her cloak. Beside her is Kasara's, whose teasing grin can be seen all the way from Kagami's position. Finally, Ryusei sits below him in some bushes. For someone so loud and obnoxious, he sure is a stealthy bastard. It's hard to see him despite the fact that he has bright orange hair. Down below him in the courtyard, the dignitaries from Iwagakure have finished negotiations with Rika Akabane. They at least tried their best to not look intimidated by a woman 20 years younger than they are. A smirk finds its way onto Kagami's face. He then puts a hand to his ear. Everyone in position? Oh, of course I am. Yukihara Whisper yelled while tugging at her hood, pulling it down farther to avoid further embarrassment. The sound of her sister snickering was all that could be heard. Yeah, I'm in position, haha. Are you done now? Good, in position. Kazuya's voice was but a whisper, he was really serious about this stuff. Who the hell do you think I am? Of course the hero of Gleaming Daylight is in position. Everyone sighed. Ryusei practically shouted into his mic, yet none of the dignitaries seemed to even notice. Be quiet, Ryu. Now isn't the time for your manly tirades. Kazuya's stern chastising voice came through the line. A chuckle escaped Kagami's lips as he raised his arm. He then raised 3 fingers. Everyone then stiffened. Yes, even the Konoha who thought they were being sneaky. Alright, in 3, Yukihara brought her hands together and began to unleash a series of hand seals. Her sister began to do the same thing. Down below Kagami, Ryusei moved his to the hilt of his sword. Kazuya unfurls a long length of chain from inside his cloak. Temperature drops a little bit. The dignitaries notice this, or at least one of them, who looks around suspiciously. Kagami holds back a slight chuckle. How scum like him became a jonin was beyond the rebel. His hand now only held up 2 fingers. The sound of Ryusei pulling a piece of his blade out of its scabbard could be made out. Now both dignitaries were suspicious. Don't worry, the rebel scum are too afraid of Rika-sama to attack us here. One of the greens reassured the jonin. A smirk formed on all of said rebels' faces. Now Kagami only held 1 finger in the air, before pulling it back in. Immediately afterward Yukihara unleashes her technique. Ice release. Field of asphodel. The ground beneath their targets froze and froze them in place as well. Kasara then followed up with her own jutsu. Crystal release. Ruby snow. Unable to move, her crystal snow fell on the dignitaries and guards without any problems. Immediately afterward the bodies became crystallized. Take this, you bastards. Kazuya jumps down and spreads his chain everywhere and wraps it around as many crystallized bodies as possible. He then tugged on them and shattered them to pieces. At the same time, Ryusei flipped out of the bushes. Ninja art. Gleaming daybreak. All that could be then seen was the flash of his blade. The remaining crystallized people shattered to pieces as well. With a smile on his face, Kagami flipped off of the wall and landed down on the ground, where the rest of his group surrounded him. You can come out, Senator. We know you're there. He turns his head to the side where, in a corner, a senator was cowering in fear. Why does a dictator have senators? To make it seem like it isn't a dictatorship, despite the fact that everyone knows that they don't hold any real power. Get back, get away from me, you red scum. Kagami walks forward, chakra coating his hand. With one swift motion the leader of the resistance slices off his head. Blood squirts everywhere. TCH. It's all over my clothes now. Kazuya frowned. Then go and change. Kagami smirked. Well, we can't keep our guests waiting, can we? He says, looking pointedly at the Konoha ninja. Sakurai, you idiot. Close your mouth. I don't want that hunk to think that we're weird. A round of chuckles flew by. A groan escapes Naruto's lips. His eyes slowly snap open. Looking around, he spots Sasuke sitting on the windowsill, eating a bowl of ramen. A smile forms on the blonde's face. I think I'm finally getting to yaw. He then continued his look around the empty room, save for Kakashi, who didn't look like he had even moved an inch from his spot against the wall. Where are they? Sasuke looked up from his bowl of ramen. By them, do you mean our teammates, or our informant? I was thinking both actually. His teammate shrugs and goes back to eating his bowl of ramen. Kakashi walks over to the window and lets the morning rays of the sun shine through. Looking back to his students. Naruto, go and get some chairs, preferably around 5 or 6. Sasuke, when you're finished, go and prepare another batch of ramen. Naruto stood up and stretched out his shoulders. Why, visitors? Kakashi takes one last look outside before answering. Yes. The copycat of Konoha stared at the teen on the chair across from him. Kagami simply stared back at him. How a teenager like Kagami became the leader of a notorious rebellion was beyond Kakashi. It was surreal. Even to him it was hard to understand. Kagami's lean and thin frame didn't make him stand out. His jet black hair was simply normal. The leader had an unremarkable face. There was simply nothing that stood out for him. Yet, Kakashi could understand why. His members were so loyal. Kagami was one of the most charismatic individuals he had met, and it stumped him. Kakashi had met a lot of charismatic people in his life, having been trained by one himself, yet Kagami baffled him. How could someone so unremarkable have the same air and make people feel inspired when they talk, as the fourth Hokage? He had only said a few words to his group earlier, yet they were suddenly filled with renewed vigor. Are you just gonna stare at me the whole time? Kagami had a raised eyebrow. The silver-haired Cyclops had been staring it for the last few minutes now. Ah, sorry. It's just, Menma didn't say his informant would be the Smoky Phantom. Kakashi had the right to look a little sheepish as he scratched the back of his head and simply laughed off his mistake. It's just, I never imagined you'd be so young. Kagami smiled slyly. Yeah, I get that a lot. He then brought his bag up to his lap and fished through it, pulling out a small wooden chest. Now, onto business. His eyes wide, Kakashi's hands roamed across the chest, examining it. Is this what I think it is? He has a pretty good idea, but just to be safe. Yes. Before Menma left, he gave this to me. Told me that someone would be coming over to pick it up. The raven-haired man explained, walking over to the sink and pouring himself a glass of water. And before you ask, no. No, I did not look inside. I believe you. Kakashi sighed, leaning back in his chair, bringing the box up and taking an even more careful look at the box. Anything else you need to say? No. Forgive me if I don't believe you. Are you sure that there isn't anything else? Any prudent information that would help out? Ah, well, maybe? Kagami sighed and returned to his seat. It's hard to say. I don't know what classifies as pertinent information. I see. Well, just tell me whatever you think is something that I need to know. That Konoha needs to know. Kakashi leaned forward once again. In his hand was a notebook and a pen. Well, rumor has it that the cult of the snake god has started to become more active. Cult of the snake god? The Yamata no Orochi. Anyways, this is really important. From what I've heard, there are really high-ranking shinobi in multiple nations that are members of the cult. That means that the cult would have near infinite support from said nation, if they were in a high enough position. Kagami furrowed his brow and huffed. That's what I think happened today. Kakashi looked up, his eyes widening. He then waved at Kagami, telling him to continue. Now to clarify, what I mean is, one of the higher-ups in the Iwagakure, or maybe the Tsuchikage himself, is a member of the cult. Now, how does this fit in? Well, the land hidden by the smoke is the birthplace of the cult. The rebel took a sip from his glass of water. So, making an alliance like this, gives the cult more control over their birthplace. Technically anyways. If there is anything that's good about Rika Akabane, it's that she actively tries to remove their presence from this shithole. Excuse me if I sound ignorant or rude, but how is this pertinent information? Kakashi, truth to be told, had only heard bits and pieces of the cult, and they were nothing good. But they were never kept him up at night. It's alright. Most people don't think too much of a cult that worships a quote-unquote dead god. But what they don't realize is that the cult is more dangerous than most groups out there. They're a cult for crying out loud. What makes them dangerous is that they will do anything for their god. They are the extreme of the extreme. Kakashi set down his pen and looked up at Kagami. From the sounds of it, you've had some bad experiences with the cult. Kagami nodded. Continue anyways. Last I remember, my contact in the cult told me that the higher-ups in the cult are planning something big. He doesn't know what it is, he's only a grunt after all. But from what they've told me, it might be something bigger than the revival of Kagaya. But that's not possible, unless their plan is to summon the Yamata no Orochi itself. Kagami's face looked even more serious. But that's my theory. I could just be really paranoid. Now, where is your tempura? A deep sigh escapes from Sayoko's throat. She rests her head on her arm. Locks of raven hair fall in front of her equally black eyes. Talking to Ryusei in front of her, and very animatedly in fact, was Naruto. A grin on his face. Another sigh. Sayoko feels the couch sink, as another person puts their weight on it. It must be Sasuke or something. One more sigh comes from her lips. A shiver goes down her spine, as Naruto smiles and laughs at something Ryusei says. Could you be any more obvious? Sayoko jumps up and looks behind her. Sitting there, is definitely not her brother. Unless her brother suddenly became a girl with chrome-colored hair. Sayoko thought she would have been more beautiful if she wiped that smug smirk off of her face. I don't know what you're talking about. That just caused Kasara's smirk to become bigger. If it was possible. Really? You know, I don't think you could make it more obvious that you have a thing for him. Well, unless you straight up say it to his face. What? No, you've got it all wrong. Sayoko tried her best to keep her face from becoming any more red than it already was. This seemed to merely encourage Kasara. Really? Then were those sighs of boredom? Yes. And to relieve your boredom, you decided that checking out your teammate was the best solution? A grin broke out on Kasara's face. Yes. I mean no. This seemed to answer the rebel's question as she leaned back into the couch. Sayoko let out a breath she didn't know she was holding in. However, that feeling would be short-lived as the grin reappeared on Kasara's face moments later. So you mean I can stare at that six-pack all day, free of charge? This brought out a change in Sayoko's demeanor immediately. She brought her face close to Kasara, her eyes dark. Back off. He's mine. Kasara's grin never once wavered, even with the crazy amount of focused killing intent aimed at her. Haha. Relax, I was just joking. Plus that just confirmed to me that he does indeed have a six-pack. She waved off the female Uchiha, who eased up on the killing intent. Anyways, I've seen people act like a tsundere. I've seen people act like a yandere. But never have I seen anyone flip-flop between the two. In only 2 sentences too. But I don't even like that dolt. Sayoko snarled, trying to look and sound intimidating. Though, her red face and squeaky, stuttering voice didn't do anything to make her sound intimidating. That line right there doesn't help your case. She smiled at Sayoko. But I know a tsundere when I see one. I've developed what you call a tsundere radar, if you will. Being twins with one helps as well. Kasara continued, averting their gaze toward Yukihara and Kazuya. Ah, thank you for the drink, Yuki-chan. Ow, what the hell? You moron. I didn't do it for you. You just seemed thirsty. Yukihara huffed and looked away, preventing Kazuya from seeing her flustered face. See what I mean? Sayoko nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, tsundere much. Kasara let out a laugh. Pot calling the kettle black. Don't think I haven't caught you sneaking glances at tall, blonde and sunny over there, every time you think I'm not looking. Plus, whenever you do it, I can hear you sighing. Really deeply too. You remind of someone. I don't remember who though. But don't mind me. You're like the deepest sire I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. The female Uchiha looked really surprised and confused for some reason. Really? You mean, you don't know you sigh really deeply? Sayoko shook her head. No, not that. Is it really a pleasure to meet me? Now it's Kasara's turn to look confused. She moved her hand up and scratched her head. Well, for me it's a pleasure to meet new people. I don't know why it wouldn't be a pleasure. Even if that person is a jerk? I've met a lot of terrible people. And if there's one I've learned, it's that there's always reason why. She smiled at Sayoko and moved her hand to the other girl's shoulder. I get the feeling that most people don't feel the way I do. Yeah, most people are usually creeped out or off-put by how I act. Sayoko smiled sadly. And I know that's how anyone would act. Well, when you live in a shithole like this and most of the people you know are pessimistic assholes who don't know how to have fun, everyone is a pleasure to meet. Except for those assholes that think they're above everyone. To answer your second question, I live with a tsundere, so your behavior isn't really that new to me. Though your yandere side is quite different. Kasara shrugged. She leaned forward and grabbed another bowl of ramen. Thank you. I'll see you later I guess. Sayoko gave a big smile to Kasara, this time it looked genuine. She also didn't bother to hide her flustered and pink cheeks. So what was that about? Yukihara sat down next to her sister. Her long flowing platinum white hair draping over the couch, with her bright green eyes shining in the dark room. A blush was faintly visible on her cheeks. Kasara grins. Oh nothing, just girl talk, but enough about my conversation. What about you? The girl with chrome-colored hair leaned forward, grinned cheekily and wrapped her arms around her twin. If it was possible, Yukihara's face became even redder. I don't know what you're talking about. We were just having a friendly conversation. As friends, nothing else, Yukihara said, her red face and quivering voice betraying her message. Yeah, sure. Kasara then smiled at Naruto, who came over and sat down in the chair in front of them. Hey, nice safe house you got here. Thanks. Though Kakashi-sensei didn't really obtain it legally. Naruto replied, a smirk dancing on his lips. Though you guys probably have your own safe house. Legally obtained. No one in this city really gets anything, legally. We certainly didn't. Kasara leaned back in her seat. Speaking of this city, how is it, living here? Aside from the obvious fact that it's, Yukihara turned to the boy and flashed a grin. Hey, we don't mind you calling it a shithole. Because it is. We don't try to pretend it isn't. Yeah, Kasara nodded her head in agreement. But to answer your question, it sucks here. Like really. I mean there could be worse places in the world. We've certainly never been to any other city. But I doubt that it's as bad this shithole. I've been to a lot of places. All of them aren't actually how they look like in the brochure. But nothing compares to this city. I mean, there are people like getting mugged and beaten in broad daylight yet no one reacts. Yukihara snorts. Get into the inner city, then you'll really see some shit. I mean rape in broad daylight, stonings, kidnappings. People getting murdered. The Greens, whose job it is to take care of stuff like this, they don't care. Hell, sometimes they even join in. Kasara continued off from where her sister started. Most children don't live long. Those that do, well they're going to have children, whose parents won't be able to provide for them and won't be able to educate them. Then it results in the cycle repeating. It's a good thing at least one of our brothers survived. You had many? We had a couple. We never got to meet them because they died before we were even born. All we know of them were the stories that our only living brother had of them. Kasara developed a blissful smile on her face. Kurihara was the best brother one could ever have. In my completely biased opinion. Heck, he's the sole reason we even know what that means. Yukihara smiled at the mention of her brother. Yeah, he did what our parents couldn't. Not because they wouldn't, but because they just couldn't. They were frail and had numerous health problems. So when our parents died, we were only 3? Kasara nodded. Yup, I think Kurihara was only 7 when he used his very special set of skills. He was a thief. Stole food, medicine, books and clothes. Anything that he didn't have. Naruto was silent. His fingers were intertwined and held them in front of his mouth. Kasara stopped and tilted her head before flashing a grin at him. Hey, you can't change the past. So continuing on, our brother was all we had. Without him we wouldn't be here in the first place. I imagine that we'd be dead actually. Then one day, our brother disappeared, just suddenly. So who else could have done it but the fucking Greens, huh? Kasara looked at her sister who suddenly developed an angry glare. Well, who else could have done it? Huh, Kasara? There's no secret or conspiracy that Kurihara is part of. And with that Yukihara stormed off, leaving her sister alone with Naruto. Sorry, Kasara said looking out to the balcony where Sasuke, Sakurai and Sayoko were. But I don't think that our brother died, or even got caught. He may not have had training or even practiced. But he was too good to get caught. Your brother sounds like a great guy, Naruto said. Then some yelling and screaming coming from the outside. The two looked at each other before scrambling to the door. Then an explosion rocked the building. Naruto stumbled to his feet and then bolted to the door. Standing outside, Sasuke stood atop the railing looking at the chaos happening down the street. Sasuke, what's going on? It's the Greens. There was a riot or something and the Greens started killing people. Sasuke called back. Beside him stood Sayoko, whose clothes were dirty and smeared with dust and dirt. To their right was Sakurai, whose pink hair was marred by dust and dirt. Shit, where's everyone else? Kagami and Kazuya went back to the rebel hideout to get some reinforcements. I don't know where Naruko is, but last I saw her, she was with Kakashi, so don't worry about her. I kinda have to man. She's my twin, Naruto shouted back. Kasara's chrome-colored hair flashed in the ash-filled air. What was that explosion? Kasara called out, shielding her eyes from the ash. Down below everything was a mess. Most of the buildings had collapsed from that explosion. The streets were crowded with reds and oranges and greens fighting it out, though the dust-filled air made it hard to see many details. And where's my sister? She went with Ryusei to corral the crowds. Sayoko shouted back. She held up a hand to her eyes to shield herself from the debris, as another building collapsed. To answer your first question, I think the Greens are trying to weed us out by blowing up buildings with bombs. What? Where'd they get the bombs? I thought they were manufactured in Konoha only. Kasara looked alarmed. Where had the Greens gotten hold of these bombs? Konoha was known to have sanctions on the land hidden by smoke. They couldn't possibly have gotten them from Konoha. I think there might someone in Konoha who would love to see this mission fail. Kakashi called out from his position in the building across from them. To his right was Naruko, her blonde hair styled up in a low ponytail reminiscent of their sister Kimiko, rather than her usual twin tails. Danzo? Sasuke called out. Kakashi shrugged. Maybe. There are a lot of people who would love to see us fail. But if we fail, then there's a chance that Konoha would fall. Danzo would never give Rika Akabane a weapon that could cause the destruction of Konoha. Not even Danzo is that stupid. Kasara frowned. We'll deal with this later. First off, we have a bigger problem to deal with. How are we gonna dissolve our current crisis? I'll tell Yahoo sister. Yukihara shouted out from the street below them, a smile on her face. Ryu's already started to get all of the civilians out of the way, so he can use any of our trump cards. Not that we would need them. Several civilians ran past her, following a transparent-looking figure with glazed eyes. Well, what are we waiting for then? Naruko whooped as her landing created a small crater around her, blonde hair flying in the wind. You and me. She jabbed a finger at Yukihara's chest. I'm not taking no for an answer, by the way. And with that the duo ran off. A second later, an explosion could be seen and heard a couple of streets away. How about some bro bonding time Sakurai wrapped in around Sasuke with a grin on his face. Sasuke looked at the trio of Naruto, Kasara and Sayoko with a skeptical look. Don't worry about it, man. We can handle ourselves. Naruto called out, giving Sasuke a thumbs up. Sakurai leant in to beside Sasuke's ear. Listen, this may be her chance, man. They both knew what he meant behind those words. A frown appeared on the Uchiha's face. I'm not too sure about that. No? Then when? She can't keep him out of the loop forever. Unless you're implying that Naruto already knows that Sayoko is hopelessly in love with him to the point that it's bad for her health. Sakurai replied as they made their way to a group of greens to the north. Cha! Sakurai roared as he slammed his fist down right in the middle of the group. Most of the greens either fell to the ground dazed, or flew back. Except for the one whose head caved in and imploded. Never mind. Focus on the fight, Sasuke called out, shaking his sword as he pulled out of the green's body. Sakurai merely grinned, picking up two downed greens by the collars of their shirts, before ramming their skulls together. He slightly flinched as the gray matter of their brains splattered onto his clothes. The medic then ducked, dodging a sloppy jab at the spot where he stood. The guy who decided that was a good idea try and attack, then flew into the air, his jaw shattered, bone pushed up into his brain. Somehow, Sasuke twirled around and between several greens, the light shining off of his blade as it ripped through their flesh like it was butter. Blood flew through the air as he sheathed his sword, unaware of the green sneaking up on him. Sasuke knelt, his eyes closed. Sakurai then flipped over him, his foot blowing through the green's head like it was tissue paper. Chakra formed in Sasuke's hands, as they quickly flew through a set of hand seals. Chidori Senbon. He quickly threw the chakra needles at a group of greens that were attempting to get away. They were now pinned to whatever surface was near them. I can never understand how none those missed their intended target. Sakurai grunted, gripping the neck of a green, before quickly breaking her neck. A frown was visible on his face. But hey, I ain't complaining. He lets go of the body. Sakurai turns his head to the right, where a massive explosion and a giant pillar made of crystal sprouts up from the ground. Shit, Naruto coughed, lifting the giant chunk of a wall off of his body. Debris was all around him. He winced once again, dust from the debris entering his body. He took a knee and surveyed the area around him. To his right, Sayoko was hiding behind a fallen pillar, clutching her left arm. Standing atop the massive crystal pillar was, not Kasara. Aforementioned rebel, lay embedded into a wall adjacent to Naruto. The man standing atop the crystal pillar held his arm out, the air around him distorted. His long, blue, ankle-length trenchcoat flew in the wind, a sneer marring his elegant-looking face. To complete his regal look, his dark brown hair was swept back. I was just looking to enjoy a nice and peaceful day. He snarled, thrusting a hand out at Kasara. She screamed, the air around her distorting, the wall collapsing. Today marks what? Our 13th date, you could say. His smooth voice turning into a snarl. Naruto made eye contact with Sayoko. He lifted 2 fingers and crossed them with his left index finger. She nodded, understanding what he meant, and began to do a series of hand seals. Now what do you have to say for yourself, Kasara? The blue in question asked, clenching his hands tighter. Kasara's screaming intensified as the air around her warped even more. Screw you, Hayato? She somehow found a way to taunt her opponent. Kasara managed to turn her head and eyed Naruto. She nodded, a pained smile on her lips. Sayoko finished jutsu and leapt out from her cover. She stood atop a pile of rubble. Fire release. Great fire annihilation. A huge plume of fire was expelled from her mouth. However, the fire simply flowed around Hayato, as if there was a barrier around him. I can't kill you. Not unless I want there to be an international scandal at my hands. Rika-chan would have my head. A cruel smirk formed on his face. But that doesn't mean I can't hurt you. He thrust out his free hand at Sayoko. Naruto's eyes widen as the air around Sayoko distorts and begins to exert pressure on her thin and lithe body. Sayoko is forced to her knees. The blonde scans the area for anything that could be of use. Though to no avail. Guess we'll have to hold up till Kakashi-sensei gets here. He then jumps back as Hayato fully focuses on him, with Kasara now slumped over, unconscious. Have to keep out of his view. Naruto mutters under his breath, leaping from building to building. Each former hiding place getting blown up, the air warping around them, crushing and disintegrating them. Naruto did not want to get caught in that. Shit. The blonde gets flown back as a chunk of debris smashes into his body. Damn it. He places his hand on the ground, balancing himself. Naruto snarls at Hayato and quickly makes several clones of himself. You bastard. Naruto roars, charging at Hayato, completely ignoring his previous analysis of the situation. Chakras swirling in his right hand. He swings his chakra-loaded fist at Hayato, who simply sidesteps his attack. Oh sorry, didn't notice you there. Hayato smirks and lowers his left hand, shoving into the pocket of his trench coat. Let's dance, Naruto growls and swipes at Hayato, again and again. Missing all the way. Hayato grins, wraps a hand around the blonde's arm. He pulls the genin in and slams his knee into Naruto's gut. Damn it, where's Kakashi-sensei? Naruto jumps back and blurs through a couple of hand seals. Wind release, gale palm. A huge gust of wind blew at Hayato. With only a split second to make the technique more effective, Naruto quickly reached into his pouch and hurled several shuriken. Ninja art. Shadow shuriken jutsu. The 3 shuriken then became 6 and then 12 and then 24 and so on. The blue in front of him simply waved his hand, an invisible force freezing the blades in midair, making them clatter harmlessly to the ground. Got any more tricks up your sleeve? Though I doubt you'll. Shit. Hayato crumples, his hands up to his face. Naruto grins, holding his hand out, ninja wires shining in the light. Did ya see that coming, huh? Bastard. He retracted the string back, with a shuriken attached to the end of it. While he looked on the outside, Naruto was panicking. That cheap shot probably did little to no damage. And it for sure made Hayato angry instead. So with that in mind, Naruto retreated into the shadows. He looked around. Where are all the greens? With commotion like this, you'd think that the place would be swarming with them. But they've probably been deployed to other places in the city. Kemari City was huge. Bigger and way more populated than Konoha, that was for sure. You fucking brat. An immense pressure was exerting itself on Naruto as Hayato roared in anger. The air began to warp and twist. The blue was releasing a bright blue aura. The ground vibrates. Hayato's head rapidly scans the area. As his eyes fly past Naruto they twist, before his head whips back to Naruto's position. Found you. Kakashi ran across the roofs of the city, making his way toward the giant towering crystal pillar. Something must have happened there. Kakashi's eyes scanned the environment cautiously. Why wasn't Rika responding to the destruction? Something was amiss. The silver-haired Jonin's eyes snapped back to the crystal, as the air seemed to warp and distort. Then the massive standing crystal shattered into a million or more pieces. Kakashi stops momentarily. In that split second, he lifts up forehead protector, Sharingan swirling to life in his eye. A massive crystal flies towards the Jonin. Kakashi kneels down and then leaps. As soon as his foot lands on top of the crystal, the silver-haired Jonin propels himself forward and towards the pile of destruction. What have you gotten yourself into, no, my cute little students? Hurry up, move it, this our chance to back that part of the city. Go! Kazuya roared at the rebel soldiers who were marching. The rebel lieutenant looked back Kagami who was lagging behind. Their leader had his hands stuffed into the pockets of his jacket, a blank look on his face. He suddenly stopped and took a quick glance to the side, as if he was expecting someone. Kazuya, go ahead, I'll catch up with later. I have something I have to do first. Kazuya didn't even have a chance to reply before Kagami disappeared. Kazuya merely shook his head, a smile on his face. Try not to take too long, boss? Kagami reappeared in an abandoned warehouse. It was falling apart at the seams. Rusted pillars, fallen beams and stray pieces of metal everywhere. Weeds and grass overgrown. Standing in the middle was a figure in a black cloak. A smile on his face. It was as if he had been expecting the rebel leader. Which he had. He then held his hands outward, welcoming the teen. You came. Kagami snorted. Did you think otherwise? Unlike you, I'm a man of my word, Satoshi. Satoshi's smile grew. He stepped out of the shadows and began circling around Kagami. Yes, you are. But it doesn't matter. What is your answer? Have you considered our offer? I need more time. You're running out of time. Satoshi snarled, his face up and near Kagami's grill. Kagami stood there staring at the spot in the shadows where Satoshi stood. It's simple really. You accept my offer, no one dies. Well, we both know that's a lie. A lot of people will die. Then what's the point? Kagami whispered, still standing his ground. Either way, someone is going to die. But, I'd rather we die quickly and painlessly than to suffer any longer. So is that a yes? I told you, I need more time to think about this. How about this? You accept our offer and I promise that there will be no more suffering in the world. All the problems, solved. All the bad things, gone. Satoshi whispered into Kagami's ears. But at what cost? The forests of Konoha. The harsh rays of the sun beat down on two blondes. The male's blonde hair was short and shaggy and covered his eyes. His outfit didn't seem to be appropriate for the hot weather. A gray and white long-sleeved shirt with the sleeves rolled up, along with long black pants tucked into combat boots. Sweat poured off of him in droves. Saori-chan, it's so hot. He looked at the short girl next to him. She grinned, her long blonde hair styled into a braid to the side. She however seemed to be perfectly content in the intense heat. A white tank top allowed her to breathe in the harsh sun. Her tan-colored shorts showed off her legs and cooled Saori off. I told you it would be a bad idea to wear that. But since I'm your little sister and you're my older brother, I guess you're always right. Menma laughed weakly and patted Saori's head. You're a good girl. Too bad you're too short. I'm only 14. I still have, like, 2 years to grow. Saori shot back. Menma shook his head. Yeah, your head would be burning right now. Saori nudged her brother. But hey, you grew your hair out. So now one will mistake you for Naruto. Or Arashi. Or father. Menma ignored her and ran to a rather large tree. Shade. Oh not Kami. Menma fell to his knees, hugging the tree, that gave the two of them shade. Get a hold of yourself. Sometimes I wonder who's more mature. You, a 21-year-old. Or me, a 14-year-old. We're almost home. Ah, home. Do you think they've run out of ramen? I hope not. Saori shivered. That's the stuff of nightmares. Correction. Those are your nightmares. As well as Naruto and Mom's. Oh, and Natsumi, Kimiko, Himiko. Okay, I get it. We're obsessed with ramen. But at least we're not as obsessed as Lin is with oranges. Or Ren with bananas. Who? Saori sighed. Friends of mine. Back at the capital. They're celebrities. Oh, you're talking about those idols. Right? Yes. You're friends with them? Yes. I see. Oh hey, Hokage Mountain. It was a dark room. But not so dark that Kazuma couldn't see. What little light there was squarely in the center. Sitting in that old wooden chair, stained with blood and shit, was their good old friend, the bandit leader Soda. Lying around him were puddles of his own blood. There also happened to be a stray thumb lying around. Kazuma smiled grimly at the bandit leader. Soda lifted his head, eyes wide with fear. A strong pungent smell filled the small gray room. A dark spot appearing in what was left of the bandit's trousers. He began to shake violently and started to subtract numbers. How are you doing, Soda-san? Kazuma said with a twist of his mouth. Soda shook even harder as his sobs rang out. Calm down. I've let you keep your manhood. So try not to lose it, will you? Please, I don't know anything else, I've told you all I know. Soda sobbed even harder, blood seeping from his wounds, as his violent shaking opened them up. You know more than really do. It'll take some time, but you will tell us everything. In time. The black-haired Namikaze flashed his teeth. But in the meantime, clean up. Soda continued to shake, ignoring the stale bread and murky water laid out on the table in front of him. A wet rag had been thrown onto him. I'll be back after lunch. Kazuma slowly walked backwards away from the light and into the shadow. Standing next to the two-way mirror was Ibiki, a frown on his scarred face. Kazuma raised an eyebrow. Is something wrong? The head interrogator shook his head. Have you learned anything important? Depends. What counts as important? We aren't going to get anything super important out of him. They're locked it away in his mind. I had Inoichi look through, but he said that it would take more than a month to get through into his head. Interesting. Well, what has he said? Bandit movements, bandit camps. Their supplier. They may be important. I haven't looked into it yet. Kazuma leaned back onto the table, as Ibiki frowned once more. Something is obviously up. Your father wants you to tone it down a little. That was no surprise. His father never did like his method of interrogation. But it worked. And frankly, I agree. If it was possible, Kazuma's eyebrow raised up high. Ibiki then walked out of the room silently. I'll think about it. Think about what? Kazuma slowly turned his head to the side. Standing next to the door was a girl with short red hair, a big smile on her face. Over the standard Anbu uniform, she wore a red jacket that stopped at the midriff. Nothing you need to worry about? Kazuma squinted at her. How'd you get in here, Natsumi? He could have sworn that there was only one door. The door. Didn't you see me walk through? Kazuma shook his head. Well, anyways, father said you had something for me to do. Ah yes. Do you know any black market dealers called Suzuki Hirano? Natsumi frowned, but nodded. Yes. A couple of months ago I staked out his place. Rumor has it that he has ties with the old Akatsuki organization. Why do you need to know? Our friend in there tells me that he's their supplier. Since you've already had experience with him, I want you to spy on him. Gather intel. Something tells me he's more than just a black market dealer. Yeah, I said that in my report too. I'm not going to make any promises. I already have my hands full with Iwagakure spies. I'll try to spare some time for it though. Natsumi said with an apologetic smile. Natsumi looked at Soda, who was still convulsing uncontrollably. Anyways, have you seen Kimiko? Natsumi's eye twitched slowly. She was alone, the door was open. Fucking hell. Could you at least say no instead of doing your nightingale act? Konoha General. Saori sat patiently next to her brother, as he told his story. Some of it made her heart ache. The plight of the people of the land hidden by smoke. It made her sad, but some of what he said sounded like he had just made it up. If Naruto weren't there to confirm, then she definitely would have thought that, maybe her brother had been hit a little too hard. So before we left, I made a promise to the girls. Kasara specifically. At this Sori's ears perked up. Her lips curled. What a guy her brother is. I promised that I would save her from her shithole of a life. Fat chance of it happening, and it might have given her false hope, but, well, I think you get the gist of it. The youngest daughter leaned back in her seat with a skeptical look. So you're telling me that you promised a girl that you just met that you would save her? Basically yes. Naruto grinned sheepishly and scratched the back of his head, wincing all the way. And, how come you didn't use your Jinchuriki form against Hayato? You said he was pretty strong. Would you believe me if I told you that I completely forgot about it? Saori shook her head in disbelief. I can. You're the kind of guy that would do that. Kenji commented from his place at the windowsill next to Naruto, who was fuming. She was angry at something, and Naruto noticed. Something wrong, Ruko? Then Naruto snapped. What's wrong? Are you really that fucking dense? You moron. She yelled at her twin, who didn't so much move a muscle. What did I do? Fuck off. Naruto stormed away, slamming the door closed, in her barely restrained anger. The sound of her stomping footsteps could still be heard. Kenji sighed. I'll make sure she doesn't do anything stupid. He strode out the door quickly, turned and gave his siblings a two-finger salute before vanishing in a puff of smoke. Naruto sighed deeply, looked down at his bandaged arms. How long are you going up this charade, Ruto? Saori bit into her apple and leaned forward. I don't fucking know anymore. If you asked me a year ago I would have said, until she gets over me. But then again, I also said that, the year before that and the year before that. But, it's so obvious. It'll never go away. Naruto buried his head into his arms. You know about this for how long? Saori crossed her legs. She didn't understand why her brother couldn't just straight up say it to Sayoko. What was wrong with rejecting her? It's not like they still couldn't be friends, right? PSSH. Yeah right. You're smarter than this, Saori. You're a genius, remember? Naruto looked up at her. Since the beginning, I'm not really sure why I thought letting get this far was a good idea. He let a bitter laugh. It's gone on way too long. She still thinks she has a chance. Saori frowned. Then why don't you give her a chance? Another bitter laugh resounded throughout the room. I can't. If I could, I would. But I just can't. But I do love her. Just, not in the way that she wants me to. I love her like a sister. Like I love you. It would feel wrong. A smile slipped onto her face. Try telling that to Kenji and Himiko. The door flew open and, locks of blonde hair spilled through. Himiko's head poking through the door, a sweet smile on her lips. What was that? Her killing intent flowed in waves. Both Naruto and Saori shivered and shook their heads violently. That's what I thought. The door slammed closed once more and the two siblings let out a breath. Getting back on track, Saori began. Just let her try. Take her out one date. If things don't work out, then too bad. If only it could be that easy. Sayoko isn't one to hold a grudge. She won't risk her relationship with you, just because you decided that things aren't going to work out. Things aren't going to be that easy. If I break her heart, Sasuke would murder me. Itachi would murder me. Shisui would murder me. If I mess things up, things may never work out. Saori let out a frustrated sigh. Okay, it's obvious, you're not going to budge. Let's move on. She knew when to give up. How's life in the capital? Edo is nice. Saori shrugged her shoulders. The capital city of Edo put every other city she'd ever been in to shame. The streets were paved with marble as smooth as a baby's bottom. The statues and monuments were made of gold that shone brilliantly. Especially when the sun reached its highest point in the sky. The people are very kind, but that's the reason why crime in Edo is so low. That and the security there is absurd. You can't go 10 feet without randomly searched. It's insane. Annoying too, if I didn't have a government pass. She whipped out a shiny plastic, red card, with a holographic flame in the center. Like it? Menma made it. I designed it though. Naruto smiled, his eyes crinkling. Looks awesome. Nice and simple. You think I could get one? Oh of course. She then reached for bag and fished around it for couple of seconds. Hold on a sec. Saori grinned and held up an identical looking card. Our entire family gets one. Saori let a peep as a hand reached out from the window and plucked the card from her hand. Can I keep this one? A bright smile took up most of the space on the red-headed girl's face. Natsumi leaned out from the window. Her smile grew when Sori's face brightened at the sight of their oldest sister. Sumi-chan. Saori wrapped her arms around her sister and hugged her tightly. I've missed you. More than usual anyways. I didn't. Naruto smirked. Natsumi grinned and playfully brought a fist down on top of her brother's head. So mean. Natsumi laughed and ruffled Naruto's hair. Kitten, what you guys talking about? Saori shrugged. Oh stuff. Well, whatever you guys were talking about obviously didn't tickle Ruko's pickle. Which is impressive. Ain't much that can under her skin. Cept the fact that Ruto is an amazing actor. Saori's mouth began to twitch as if she wanted to say something. So you know? Natsumi scoffed. Who don't? The only people who don't know is the lady, herself. And little Ruko. Can you please stop talking like that? I'm not a kid anymore, you know. Saori wrinkled her nose. Natsumi rubbed the back of her head apologetically. Sorry, I just got used to talking like this to you, ya know? But I'll stop if it bothers you so much. But speaking of siblings, where's Menma? There's something I have to ask him. The Hokage's office. Menma stared his older brother down with blank eyes. Arashi looked back, not moving much. The Anbu commander finished his report and was dismissed. Menma, your turn. The inventor stood up and walked to the front of the room. Sitting down in the seats in front were his father, Arashi, Himiko and Kazuma. Among others were Kakashi, Shikaku and other members of the Shinobi Council. Alright, based on my research and investigation of what was left of the 4 villages, I can conclude that we are only up against one man. He looked around the room, their faces were skeptical. The level of destruction was on another level. I conducted several tests, measuring the levels of chakra especially. And my results tell me that only something with 100 to 1000 times the chakra of a normal shinobi could have done that much damage. Now, what does this mean? It means, either our guy has an insane amount of chakra, or is a Jinchuriki. Menma flipped a page, eyes scanning his notes. He took a second to catch his breath. Or, it could be something else. The levels of chakra in the village were off the charts. It was deep in the soil, the walls. Around 20% of the chakra was standard blue chakra. 80% was abnormal chakra. And around 5% were natural chakra. Chakra of the earth, the ground and people. The other 95% was black chakra. Black chakra is something only users of the bloodline dark release can produce black chakra. Only demons can produce black chakra. Panicked murmurs and whispers spread through the council. But that doesn't mean we're up against a demon. No, the last demon was imprisoned over 500 years ago in the Great Sky Cell in Kumo. We don't have to worry about that. Now, I did more tests, and the more I thought about my theory, the more I was convinced. A user of dark release makes black chakra by absorbing normal blue chakra and converts it to black chakra. Arashi's eyes narrowed as he caught on. The tailed beasts aren't the only beings made up of pure chakra. Suzaku the vermilion bird of the south, for example, is one that we revere and worship. But he is made up of divine chakra. So here is my theory. The person responsible for this absorbs the chakra of the villagers. He or she then converts it to black chakra. Then, either using some special technique or a special device, creates a tailless tailed beast. Menma let that settle in for a second before continuing on. Now, what makes them different from normal chakra beasts? Well, for one, black chakra is corrosive and melts objects upon contact. It also seeps into the surrounding area, and when natural chakra becomes in contact, it slowly converts into black chakra. The area affected becomes infertile. No life can grow since there is no natural chakra, which is what makes things grow. Just being around black chakra is dangerous. Black chakra can seep into the ground, as I have said earlier, and travels into anything with natural or blue chakra and tries to convert them. If a person's chakra coils were to become infected with black chakra, his body would be melting from the inside out, and even if the black chakra is stopped before it can spread, it has already done enough damage. Infertility, chakra loss of nerves in the body, critical blood loss, chakra deficiency. All things that aren't good. Menma held up a finger. But that only applies to normal civilians. People who aren't used to a physical chakra. However, we have, especially those with special kinds of chakra. Jinchuriki chakra is the closest thing to divine chakra. Black chakra cannot convert divine chakra or anything similar to it. For some reason, I still have to do some more research. He then walked up to his desk and picked up a small device. This is a special device I created that can negate the effects of black chakra. How? Simple. During my research I encountered Fu, the Jinchuriki of the 7 tails. She allowed me to take samples of her Jinchuriki chakra. I've managed to replicate her chakra. But only enough for at least 15 people. I don't have enough samples of Jinchuriki chakra to mass produce it. Does anyone else have anything to say? Jiraiya stood up. Yes. During my travels, I encountered some ancient texts that talk about a special seal that can negate dark chakra. I still have them, so we tested out. He then sat down. Next it was his father who stood up. During my time in Uzushio, your grandfather talked to me about a special technique that could repel evil chakra. I'm pretty sure that evil chakra, dark chakra and black chakra are all the same. Uzu is the land of seals, so if there is anything that could help, it should be in the library. Is there anything else that you need to report? Arashi voiced. Nothing that isn't already known. Menma then sat back down as one of the councilmen stood up and began his report. At first Menma listened intently, jotting down notes and providing information if necessary. However, as time went on, his mind began to wander. Menma held up his arm and stifled his yawn before laying his head down. When his eyes reopened, the room was empty and dark. You're awake. Good. I have something I need to discuss with you. Arashi flipped the light switch on. It was only the two of them. Menma paid his brother no mind and stretched out his back. The sound of paper landing onto the desk echoed throughout the room. Menma picked it up gingerly. It was a blueprint. His eyes scanned it quickly before stuffing it into his bag. What do you want me to do about it? Arashi shrugged. Do whatever you think needs to be done. You're the genius inventor here. I trust that you can perfect it. Arashi left without another word. Menma sighed and leaned back in his chair. He pulled out the design again. Arashi was up to something. Then again, his older brother always seemed to be thinking ahead. Designing a new barrier to replace the outdated old one. Menma smiled and picked up a pencil lying on the desk. His hand became a blur as he began to make improvements. As he took a break for his sore hands, Menma tore his gaze off the blueprint and checked the clock. It was 8 o'clock, almost time for dinner with his family. His first in nearly 5 years. A smile graced his lips. It had so long since all of the Namikaze had been in the same place. With Natsumi and her spy network, Kimiko and her assassination group. Arashi and his increased responsibilities. It's been so long since all of the siblings had just relaxed and did something together. Aside from dinner, Menma gathered his papers and stuffed them in a binder inside his bag. He stepped outside the door where Iruka and some other Chunin were making their way to the mission hall. Walking past the break room, Menma spotted his father sitting and talking with his mentor. The air outside was thick and full of scents and smells that Menma hadn't had savored in years. Lights dotted the streets and laughter filled the village. Despite it being evening, the streets were packed. Kids running around, chasing each other, playing, and doing what kids do. Their parents conversing, gossiping or scolding. It brought a slight twist of the mouth. The dango shop that he and Naruto frequented was still going strong. It still looked the same as he remembered. The red bold wording on the white banner in the back was still there. As was the giant oak desk that Menma himself made, designed and sold to the establishment. Some of the regulars were there as well. Anko in her corner, Shuza and his son at the bar area. The inventor walked past an apartment. He turned his head and looked at it intensely, scanning the windows as he walked by. One window in the highest corner to the right to be exact. His gaze lingered on that one for a second longer than the others. Menma's eyes narrowed when his eyes moved over a letter in the mailbox. Kanade. He strode forward and plucked the letter out of its box. You still live here, huh? Despite all the bad memories that it gives you? He closed his eyes and stuffed the letter into a flap inside his bag. Kanade. It stung to say her name out loud. Seeing all of the old places they used to go only made the pain worse. Ichiraku ramen and those times when she and his siblings tried to make him like ramen. A bitter smile played on his lips. He remembered how she personally fed him, despite it looking weird. Thinking about her response made Menma stop and look inside the restaurant. Because that's what couples do, right? We feed each other. The library of Tobarama, now that brought on some memories. All those times when they would sneak in to study after hours. Those times when he asked her to keep the fact that he borrowed books a secret. That one time Arashi found them in the corner sleeping after the library closed. Menma walked through the stained wooden doors that he walked through oh so many times. He waved at the librarian who, despite all of the trouble he had caused her, seemed happy to see him back. The first thing he asked was, "Where does Kanade work now?" Her answer wasn't a surprise. The lines around his eyes crinkled as he smiled. Menma made his way to the science section of the library, searching for something. He found it, a thick, hardcover book. Over 800 pages, 500 hours of research and 3 years worth of hard work he put in it. Advanced Chakra Theory by Menma Namikaze. He flipped through it, smiling at the little inside jokes only Saori or Kanade would understand. Kanade. That brought an idea to mind. He went back up the desk and didn't even get a chance to open his mouth, as the librarian took the book from his hand and signed it out. Bring it back in good condition, will you? These cost a lot of money. Menma grinned and laughed. His spirits lifted and his mind clear. Menma knew what he had to do. Menma walked out of the library, felt someone touch his shoulder. Oi Menma, where are you going? You're gonna be late for dinner. Natsumi smiled and wrapped her arms around her younger brother. Hey, what's that? A letter? For who? Oh. She smiled and stepped back, a sad look in her eyes. I'll tell Mom that you'll be late. But, a word of warning. Try not to make things worse than they already are. Menma nodded and wordlessly continued to make his way to the academy. A sad smile seemed permanent on his face. These streets, where the two of them would race to the academy as kids. These streets where they would run to her apartment whenever it rained. A humorless laugh escaped from his lips. The ruined wall from their adventures was still there, allowing perverts to peek as they would like on girls. Though to be fair, they built behind it. The large sakura tree that they would have lunch under was slowly dying. Its leaves dark and colorless. Branches, dead and drooping. Bark peeling off the trunk. All those times they would hide in the branches whenever they skipped school. The academy looked the same. As it always did. Some things would never change. No matter which generation. Be it the 3rd Hokage or the 15th Hokage. The academy would never change. Sure, the things they would learn would change, but the building itself? Never. The lights were on. Of course teachers would stay behind to work after hours. It was something that would also never change. Menma pushed the doors open and took in the memories of his time in the academy. It filled him with nostalgia. He walked up the steps, 2 at a time. He walked closer toward the lights. He stood outside room 35. It was their homeroom. He looked inside hoping to see someone there. Menma sighed and leaned against the wall. He put on a smile and waited. 10 minutes later the light closed and the door opened. Sorry to keep you waiting. Kanade smiled at Menma, her long black hair tied to the side and over the shoulder. Her eyes shone glossily. She wore the standard Konoha Chunin, Jonin uniform. Menma held out the letter. Oh, for me? How many times have I told you not to search through my mail? Countless times. But you know, geniuses never listen to anyone but themselves. Menma stuffed his hands into his jacket. Plus, I got you a present. Oh really? If I remember correctly, your presents were shit. Like that time you filled my teddy bear with dirt and manure. Kanade locked the door and stuffed the key into her pockets. Shall we go to my apartment? Can't. Don't want to be late for our family dinner. Menma smiled. Then again, it's what? 9? I'm already late. The two exited the building wordlessly. Menma leaned against a pillar as Kanade locked the door. When did you start teaching? Kanade looked up at him, her mouth closing and opening repeatedly. After you left. She laughed. The youngest teacher ever. 16 years old. She laughed again, her voice devoid of any humor. Menma looked down at the ground. How many times? His companion's jaw tightened. I stopped counting after 30. After that, your father confronted me and told me that I needed to see help. She laughed bitterly. I wished I'd gotten help sooner. Let me guess. It was Kakashi? You always were too perceptive for your own good. Menma smiled bitterly. I prefer to call it a quote-unquote good hunch. Hey, but to answer your question, yeah. It was. He found me outside my apartment, surrounded by bottles. He dragged me to the hospital, only let me off with a warning though. They stopped at the cherry tree. Kanade knelt down and picked up a bunch of flowers. Then he found me passed out under here. Alone. Drunk. She sighed, looking up at the tree. He told me that the academy had a spot open. I'm not sure what he thought would happen. But enough about my shitty story about how I became a teacher. What's going on in your life? Oh, you know, the usual. Meeting with spies, doing research, making inventions that won't ever be used how I want them to. Menma let out a deep sigh. He pointed at the small red bridge that went over the hot springs. You remember when we decided to prank Shikari? They laughed at the memory of a pineapple-headed boy falling into the stream. Yeah, and then he almost drowned to death. Hey. Funny right? Kanade said with a wry smile on her lips. Then we got really into trouble. Quote, but it was just a prank. It was supposed to be funny. Menma said in a mocking tone, his arms waving around wildly. The two shared a laugh. Is it hard taking care of Saori? Menma shook his head. Not really. She's normally a good sport. Especially when we have days off. Those are usually the best days. Don't have to worry about research. Don't have to meet up with assholes who would buy my inventions for the wrong reasons. Don't have to worry about my inventions breaking. He stopped and turned to look at Kanade. Don't have to worry about a war breaking out. Kanade smiled grimly. Sounds stressful. Makes my work seem easy. The two stopped at Kanade's apartment. Right outside her door. Don't worry too much about it. I know. It's just, I can't shake the feeling that something big is about to happen. She led them inside and set her bed down on top of the coffee table. I'm not talking about the war either. The war is going to happen. Sooner or later, something else is going to happen. Something big. Menma stayed silent, looking around the apartment. It looked the same as it did back then. You're not the only one who thinks like that. I suppose you're right though. I just hope that the cost of winning is worth it. Kanade whispered. She reappeared around the corner. Her hair no longer braided to the side. It was flowing freely down to just above her butt. It's never worth it. The peace built of off those sacrifices never last. Kanade smiled and sat down next to Menma. You know, I can't even remember the last time you talked like this. Seriously, I mean. She pursed her lips. Hey, I do. But, it brings up bad memories, I know. Menma's eyes wandered over to the diamond perched up on a pedestal sitting atop the coffee table. I'm surprised you kept it. Kanade lowered her head and rested it on Menma's shoulder. I kept the ring too. I never had a doubt. Ichiraku ramen. Saori let out a breath of air, as she momentarily stopped inhaling her bowl of ramen. Sitting next to her was Natsumi, who had a smile on her face, as she set down her bowl of ramen. To their right were Naruto and Naruko. The former of which was literally inhaling his ramen. His twin looked bored, as if she had seen it all before. Nothing beats a bowl of ramen, Saori grinned. Naruto ignored his siblings and continued to act like a human black hole. Or 2, 3, 4, okay, maybe that's too much. Saori's grin faltered as Naruto kept on going. Naruko sighed, exasperated. Don't even try. When ramen is involved, nothing short of death will stop him. Her twin looked up at her. You're exaggerating. His sisters stared at him, wiping off bits of noodles, dabbing tissues on their clothes. He quickly swallowed his current bowl. Sorry, what's the most he's ever eaten? Saori voiced, her mouth opening in awe and disgust. Mostly disgust. 24 to 25 give or take. Naruko twisted on her spinning chair, leaning back against the wooden bar. Don't ask how I know. I was there to see it. And I don't ever want to see it again. Natsumi snorted. Why are you here then? Their oldest sibling lifted up her glass beer mug. Because Saori asked me to come. Don't bring me into this. Naruto dropped his bowl loudly, as well as a couple of coins onto the counter. He then grinned and wrapped his arm around her. Too bad. He moved his mouth to beside her ear and stage whispered. Now you're even closer. Okay. Natsumi looked a little creeped out. While you two go commit the act of incest, I'm gonna go and bother Menma. She then winked and made a clicking sound. Geez, we were only hugging. Plus, does she even know where Menma is? The blonde boy intertwined his hands behind his head as they walked out of Ichiraku. Menma walked by. You'd have noticed if you weren't too busy stuffing your mouth. Naruko smirked at her brother, who stuck his tongue out at her. Anyways, what did you want to show us, Saori? Saori turned to her older siblings and began to walk backwards. Let's get to a training field first. Then I'll show you. Maybe. You're not pranking us, are you? A laugh escaped Naruto's lips. Sis, I'm the prank master, so I can tell I'm getting pranked. Especially by my own protege. Naruko looked at him with annoyance. Doesn't matter. 100% average in all our classes. Smarter than you. Oh yeah, like a piece of paper from 4 years ago still counts. Who told you that? Sakurai. Saori remained silent. Her hand reached into her pouch and pulled out a small rectangular device and clicked a button on it. A beep let out, but the sound of the streets drowned it out. Bold, blocky letters appeared. Recording. Sakurai probably said that because he's scared. Scared of what? Naruto shrugged. Dunno. Stuff. What kind of stuff? Naruto turned his head ever so slightly to the side. Having to be submissive? What? His twin screeched, her color rising, fist clenched, teeth gritted, iris become cat-like. Look, I'm just suggesting that you may want to start taking the pill, then again Sakurai isn't that careless. We're only 16, Naruto hissed, leaning in close to her brother. Saori stifled her laughter behind her hand. After calming down, Saori added her own voice to the conversation. Well, you guys are shinobi, which means you're technically adults. So your age doesn't really matter in this case. Naruto glared at her. Whose side are you on? Does Menmas count? No, Naruto roared. She then stormed away, heading towards the Namikaze mansion. Well, that escalated quickly. Naruto and Saori turned behind them to see Kazuma coming out of a grocery store, grocery bags in hand. You have no idea. Namikaze training ground. Alright, we're here. What now? Naruto threw her arms out to the side. The training ground of Namikaze's was only a 15-minute walk away from the mansion itself. It was more spacious than normal training fields, to accommodate for Kenji's temper and Arashi's habit of experimenting. A stream, about 4 feet at its widest and half a foot at its narrowest, ran through the middle of the field, scattered with small rocks and pieces of logs. A few oak trees dotted the field, as well as some craters. The biggest one being 15 feet in diameter. Saori sat underneath the biggest tree. Unlike the others, it was birch, not oak. But it was nearly 3 times as large and as old as the largest oak. Its largest branch was as wide as Naruto was tall. Their father told them that it had been there for nearly 1,000 years. Older than even the Shinju itself. Come closer, children. Mama has something to show you. At Naruto's murderous gaze, Saori shut her mouth and held her hand out. Watch. A bright light began to emit from her palm. Her eyes closed slowly. When they closed fully, the light formed a light blue rectangular prism. Saori clenched her jaw tight. The chakra construct then began to transform, slowly turning into a clear blue 3-foot-long katana. She opened her eyes and smiled. Ta-da! Before she promptly leaned over and almost fell, had Naruto not caught her. Naruto's eyes were wide. I can't believe it. She turned to her sister, who Naruto had propped up against a wall. Naruto reached out and gripped the hilt of the sword, at first lightly. Then, she gripped it like she would any other sword. You did it. She then swung the blade around, testing it. Saori opened her eyes. Yep, only took about 5 years of hard work and 80% of my chakra to make, but once I get the hang of it, I'll be able to make constructs without wasting chakra. Naruto couldn't help but smile. He patted Saori on the head. How'd you do it? Arashi tried and ended up in the hospital, almost exhausted his whole chakra stores. Well, Arashi didn't have the world's leading experts in chakra constructs and chakra theory or Menma's research papers. If he did, Arashi would have perfected it in a year. I can guarantee it. Naruto's mouth twisted. Save us all off the details later. Saori grinned. No need. All you really need is Menma's book. Advanced Chakra Theory, I think it's called. Naruto frowned. Where is Menma anyways? Kemari City, the land hidden by smoke. Hayama yawned and leaned back into his chair. In the bed in front of him was his twin Hayato. A hand ran through his brown hair, as he tried to understand what had happened. Hayato roared, slamming his foot into the ground. The ground shattered into pieces, the force of the stomp traveling all the way to the giant crystal, which caused it to shatter as well. Any remaining walls were flattened by the shockwave he created. The blue charged towards the brat who thought that today would be a good idea to mess with him. Hayato raised his fist and flew back into a pile of rubble to the side. Before he could even react, the blonde brat. Wait, why was he female now? It wouldn't matter, as the brat would smash a blue sphere into his side, which blew him through the remnants of a wall. Pain shot up his spine. He turned his head to see a pink-haired boy smash his fist into his face. After that, Hayato lay in the ground, body racked with pain. Standing over him was a man with silver hair, a man whose forehead protector covered one eye. A man that struck fear into the hearts of many. Kakashi the copycat. Kakashi's right hand stiffened as lightning began to spark around it, until the entire fist was covered in bolts of electricity. The Jonin raised his hand, ready to strike down Hayato. His eye then darted to the right and he jumped back, barely avoiding a golden beam. Hayama sighed, retracting his hand from Hayato's forehead. That was all his brother had been around for, before he blacked out. Hayama wasn't there for most of what happened. Rika's advisor had only turned up at the very end, mostly to see if his brother was still alive. He looked up, as the door opened. Out came a woman of 25 years, with long golden hair that went past her buttocks. Her face was one that Hayama would describe as beautiful. High cheekbones, heart-shaped face, plump lips. But her eyes killed any notion that she was beautiful. Those stormy gray eyes looked dead, devoid of any emotion. Her face also absent of any lines that would have suggested laughter or a smile. No, Rika Akabane didn't have time for that. She turned and walked to the footrest of Hayato's bed. She gave him a quick look over before diverting his attention to Hayama. The advisor barely managed to avoid flinching at her gaze. "Do you have any need of me, milady?" he asked, bowing his head. "No. Come take a walk with me, Hayama. Tell me what you see." He stood up and moved as fast as his legs would go, to catch up to Lady Rika. She stopped in front of the main balcony of her palace. The courtyard glistened, as the sun reflected its rays off of the ice. Past the walls of the palace, the city lay, covered in smoke and ashes. Explosions rocked the city. The city stretched for as far as Hayama could see. Well, as far as the mist would allow him to see. Even from the palace, the stench could be smelt. The scent of dead bodies, burning, rotting. The smell of fresh shit on the street. The stench of unbathed citizens. The scent of rotting food. It was a dynamite waiting to explode. "Well, what do you see?" "I see a powder keg, waiting to be lit. Soon, disease will spread and death will come in waves. As if it doesn't happen already." Hayama looked at his mistress. She paid little attention to his statement. Or so it seemed most of the time. "Filthy. All my father's work. I've been ruling for more than 21 years, and yet nothing has changed from the day I took over my moron of a father. In fact, things seem to be getting worse," she said tonelessly. "Well, it can't get worse." Hayama recoiled at the slap that he received. He moved his hand across his cheek and felt blood. "Don't be a fool." Rika turned and stared into Hayama's eyes. "Never tempt fate. Even if it seems bad, it can always get worse." She walked away briskly, her hand motioning Hayama to follow. They stood atop the silver-floored rooftop of her palace. She stood directly next to the giant hawk statue. Rika held out a hand and pointed at a massive mass of men out beyond the city walls. "Do you see that? The rebels. They are rallying outside the walls. Preparing to leave. Preparing to attack. Should we get the army ready, milady?" "No. Tell your men to keep watch and keep their guard up. Higher than normal." Fear ran through Hayama's spine as Rika Akabane smiled, the muscles around her mouth and eyes crinkling. The game is finally about to start. Arashi crossed his legs and leaned farther back into his chair. Of course Kenji was late. He glanced up at the clock with half-lidded eyes and sighed loudly. Sitting to his right was their father, with his arms crossed. "If he doesn't get here soon, I'm not making any promises that he's going out of this alive." Arashi diverted his attention to one of the two in front of him. Kage Tanaka was one of the village's finest. In more than one way. His stringy red hair and glowing green eyes often got him confused with the Uzumaki. This coupled with his preference of mostly black clothing got him confused with Kenji a lot. Kage was someone that Arashi got along well with. Mostly at the behest of his fiancée, Kage's sister, Akane. However, Kenji and Kage never did get along well. With people getting the two confused and such. It didn't exactly give a good first impression. Especially since Kage and his sister were their wards. His father had saved them from Kumo during the Third War. Most of the Namikaze often treated the two as part of the family themselves. Except Kenji. He didn't hate Kumo, but he didn't particularly like them either. Arashi shook his head and rested his feet on his desk and leaned his chair on its back legs. "Don't worry, Hokage-sama. I'll make sure these two don't kill themselves. Though I can't promise that they'll come out completely unscathed," Sojuru voiced, glaring at his teammate. Arashi closed his eyes. He wasn't sure what to think of him. Sojuru was Segumi's boyfriend. It was hard to picture that the weak-willed and cowardly kid he had once been would ever start dating his twin. It was hard to tell Sojuru apart from the crowd, his dark brown hair and brown eyes blending in with the crowd. It was both a good thing and a bad thing. Good, because it would be easier for him to blend into crowds. Bad, because he wouldn't be memorable. Arashi could never understand Sojiru's fear of being unmemorable. Arashi leaned forward, wrapped his cold, long digits around an energy drink. He smiled at the taste of grapes. Menma really should have been a businessman rather than a ninja. Hey Arashi, is Menma still in the village? I didn't get a chance to meet up with him. Speaking of Menma, Arashi shrugged. He didn't really know where Menma was, but he did know that he was still in the village. Unless he decided to ditch Saori for Kanade. I don't know, but he's still here I think. Truth to be told, Arashi really didn't know what his brother was thinking, bringing Kanade into this mess. Kanade had an idea of what the bigger picture was, but she had no idea what was really going to happen. If something were to happen though, Arashi knew that Menma would take responsibility. Minato stood up and moved over to the window. About time he got here. Arashi removed his feet from his desk and flung the aluminum can across the room into the wastebasket adjacent to the door. Kenji and Sojiru shifted, moving to the sides of the room, waiting for Kenji to make his inevitable dramatic entrance. I'm here. Arashi pressed his mouth into a thin line as Kenji blew the door open. Unsurprisingly, most of the wooden shards flew towards Cage. Kenji strode into room, took one look at Cage and promptly turned around. Only to smash into Sojiru. Where do you think you're going? Home. Duh. Where else? No, I don't think so. You're going to be staying here, with Cage. Cage shot Sojiru a dirty look. As punishment for making us wait. The consequences seemed to be way too harsh in comparison to the crime. Kenji drawled, standing up to his full height of 6 feet. Now, why am I here? I promised Himiko I would go to the orphanage with her. Cage smirked. You'd do it Himiko, but never seem to do it with any of your other siblings. What's up with that? The two redheads exchanged heated glares. What I do with Himiko is none of your business. Kenji hissed, smashing his forehead into Cage's, who stood his ground. So why don't you go fuck off? Kenji stepped back and puffed up his leather jacket. If it was possible, Cage's smirk only grew. Yeah, whatever. It's not like your secret is actually, a secret and all that shit. Kenji gave Cage an angry glare. Arashi, sensing the tension in the air, coughed, grabbing everyone's attention. May I take the floor? Minato nodded. Arashi stood up and grabbed a pile of papers stapled together and stood up. He gave each member one copy. Now, war is on the horizon. That much is certain. What we need in a war are allies. Now, there is little to no chance that Kumo would enter an alliance with us. Especially if the Tatsuharas lose the rebellion. I've already sent an envoy to Suna, and Iwa is completely out of the question, even if they have a new Cage. Arashi sat back down. Moving on. I've managed to convince Yagura to have an audience with you. I would go, if I could. But there are some more pressing matters that I have to attend to. Arashi opened up his mini-fridge and pulled out another energy drink. Don't worry. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. Everything that is need to be said is on those papers. So you don't have to worry about accidentally rubbing people the wrong way. Kenji frowned. Any questions? Yeah, how long is this mission going to take? Cage stuffed his hands into his pockets. If something were to happen here. Listen, nothing is going to happen to Akane, alright? The reason why I chose you guys to go, is to show them, that despite our troubles, Konoha is strong. We are strong because of our troubles. They make us strong. I know this is very corny and dramatic, but you have to take this seriously. Arashi pressed his mouth into a line. If things don't work out, then we'll just figure something out. His father said, sitting down in his seat. Now, try not to cause an international scene, alright? Are we clear on this? Oh ye of little faith. Kenji looked insulted, his hand reaching for his chest, before breaking out a big grin. We'll try. Cage simply nodded, while Sojiru was too busy analyzing the document. Arashi smiled and decided to add in something as well. Try not ripping each other's throats out, okay? I promised Akane that her brother would come home unharmed. Cage snorted as if he had just heard a stupid joke. Oh, he'll live, that's all I can guarantee. In a body cast maybe. Kenji's grin became playful. Without eyes or ears maybe. Without a tongue. Please. As if you could. Cage turned to Arashi. I'm not going to make any promises either. Just know that I'll try my best not to hurt Kenji too bad. Nothing that a permanent stay at the hospital can fix. He said with a smirk. Sojiru looked up from the paper. I'm not going to be able to sleep at night, am I? Nope. 529. Arashi stretched his arms and yawned. He wiggled his hand around, loosening the tightness in his hand that he gained from stamping papers. He looked back at his father, who was still stamping away. Or at least one of his clones, as the original was taking his rest. Minato noticed his son looking at him. Is something wrong? Not really. It's just, was it a good idea to send those two together? I'm more concerned that they're going to cause a scene rather than them dying. Arashi stood up, opened a window and leaned out to smell the scents of the night. The smell of ramen, spices and whatever other foods there are. Minato smiled at him. Yes, they won't let anyone else kill the other, because only they can kill themselves. Don't worry about it. Sojiro is a good mediator, but he'll have his hands full this time. Arashi nodded, albeit skeptically. Do we have any more information on this Suzuki Hirano? It was a name that Kazuma had brought up, that got Arashi interested. If he remembered right, he was the one responsible for the downward spiral of the Konoha economy. How? By stealing goods manufactured in Konoha and selling them to the black market. His father shook his head. Nothing as of yet. I put Kimiko on the case though. I've told her to maim him only slightly. His lips curl up a bit. Kimiko was one of the few members of his family who shared his mentality. She'll pull through. Arashi sat back down and looked at the new documents that were dropped off at his desk. He quickly read through it, eyes widening. Father, this is? Minato looked over his son's shoulder with calculating eyes. Yes. Kumo is now bidding to become the host city of the Chunin exams. But I thought they were still in the middle of a rebellion? I received word from Gao Tatsuhara earlier this day that the rebellion is over. That they had won. This shouldn't worry us too much. They'll still be rebuilding anyways. Arashi bit his lip. That's true. Plus the Tatsuhara were always a very influential family. Without them, Kumo wouldn't have become the most powerful village in all of the elemental nations. They could easily pay for the rebuilding and still have enough money to pay for the exams. But why would they let potential enemies in when their defenses are still down? Because they need to consolidate their power. They're showing that they aren't afraid to let potential enemies in. The people of Kumo have always been proud. His father took in a deep breath. Let's just hope that the Tatsuhara family doesn't make the same mistakes as the previous cages did. Arashi sat back down and reread the papers on his desk. Something caught his eye. It was part of the report Kakashi had given them when his team returned from the land hidden by the smoke. The gears in his head began to turn faster and faster. He looked at the clock. It was 5:32 in the afternoon. There is still some time. I'd best get going if I want to catch up with her. Arashi stood up. May I be excused? Without even listening for his father's consent, he grabbed his bag and placed some papers in them. Of course. Oh, and while you're at it, find Kimiko. Her mission starts in a few hours and needs to be debriefed on it. Arashi nodded, strapped his bag to the side of his hip and proceeded to walk out of the room. He stopped in the break room to get a cup of coffee to reinvigorate him. Trying to find Kimiko was very difficult to say the least. It was no wonder she was called the real-life Nightingale. Where could she be? He muttered under his breath, setting his cup down onto the table, the small stained coffee table in the room. He heard someone enter the room, but brought no attention to it. Arashi? Arashi's eyes turned up and slowly turned his head to see a girl around his height with long light blonde hair that was so light it might as well have been white. She wore a black strapless dress that stopped short of the middle of her thigh underneath a bolero that was black as night. Her legs were covered with thigh-high black leggings. Am I seeing things? Arashi, Mr. All Work No Play, taking a break? Kimiko's jaw opened, a look of disbelief setting in. Is that so hard to believe, dear sister? She made a face at that statement. Oh no. What do you want? You never call us that. You know what? I think I may need to sit down. Her long ponytail swished from side to side, colliding against a face that most would consider beautiful. If that cold, calculating glint in her eyes ever went away. Well, I have something I need to discuss with you. Isn't that all you talk about? Kimiko smirked, crossing her legs and draping her arm over the side of one of the couches. But go on. Do you anyone by the name of Satoshi Hirai? A surprised look crossed Kimiko's face. When I was undercover in the cult of the snake god, he was the first person I met. She shuddered. Seems like a nice person when you meet him. Most of everyone thought so as well. He seemed harmless. Kimiko tapped the inside of her thigh with her thumb idly. That is until the Grand Master of the cult died. Satoshi deemed it fine for him to take control. He was of course the second highest ranked member of the order. But then things turned violent when he announced himself the envoy of the Yamato no Orochi. She pressed her mouth into a thin line. That ticked off a lot of the other Grand Masters in other chapters of the cult. Our chapter got attacked a lot more. Like a lot more. We were treated as the black sheep of the cult. She leaned forward, intertwining her fingers. And then Satoshi decided to make a point known. I feigned sickness that day. I heard from my fellow cult members that they raided a village that worshipped the Yamato no Orochi because they were calling Satoshi the fake envoy. Arashi furrowed his brow. Before you continue, can you clarify what the envoy is? The envoy of the snake god, in the prophecies of the cult, is said to be the one to bring back the Yamato no Orochi. He is said to be the one to bring chaos and destruction the world, and become the snake god's right hand. Continuing on, Satoshi decided to make an example of those that would oppose him as envoy. Kimiko looked up at her younger brother. Listen, whatever you're trying to do, don't go after Satoshi. There's something about him that just screams, stay away. Arashi smirked. Not going to make any promises, but I'll try. His smirk disappeared as quick as it arrived upon his lips. Arashi shook his head. What a mess things are turning out to be. Kimiko laughed bitterly. Well, I think when the child of prophecy turned code and betrayed us, that foreshadowed something. She laughed. Do you think he's behind all the crap that's going on? No. Kirei was never a leader or a follower. He always did his own thing. Then who do you think is actually behind all this? Arashi sighed. Not really, but I have an idea. He sighed once again and crossed his legs. Tell me, have you ever heard of the legend of Toru Tanaka? Kimiko looked puzzled. I've heard the name, but I don't really know much. According to Kumo legend, Toru is responsible for essentially creating the city of Saikyo, or the village now known as Kumogakure. However, he is most known for creating the biggest and most expansive library in the whole continent. The White Library. Kimiko frowned. And your point? That's not all. Urban legend says that Toru never died and still lives to this day. Kimiko scoffed. From what I recall, the legend of Toru began all the way back nearly 2,000 years ago. In the early days of Chakra. Plus, do you really believe in urban legends? Arashi shook his head. Not really. But it's an idea. And if Madara Uchiha lived for as long as he did, then why can't a figure of legend as well? Well, you always did keep an open little brother. Kimiko smiled, jerking her head to the side, moving the hair out of her eyes. Well, it's been a nice discussion, but I've got to go and debrief now. Bye, and good luck. Kimiko turned her head over her shoulder, lips curling into a smirk, her eyes glinting. I don't need it. Edo, the land of fire. Menma trudged his feet along the ground. His feet were sore and wet and dirty. Saori only laughed while Kanade chided him for wearing those cheap shoes that he bought because of his terrible foresight and forgetfulness. Well, at least Kenji offered to lend him a pair of his shoes. What really irked him was how glacial their pace was. Well, to Menma it was. He would have liked it if they went faster. Now they were stuck outside a roadside stop, waiting for the girls to finish their business. Training or not, Saori could not control her bladder. Cage was still the same as he remembered. Sarcastic, to the point where Menma wasn't sure whether or not he was being sarcastic whenever he said something. Sojiro was still a nerd and Kenji. So let me get this straight. Last night, you did some stuff with Kanade? Kenji was fighting the smile, and if his quivering was anything to go by, he was also fighting back a laugh. Yes, a lot of stuff actually. This time Kenji did laugh. Sorry, but it's kind of hard to imagine you doing that. Especially after what happened when you first left. Look, can you just, I don't know, drop the subject? I don't feel like talking about it. As if Menma wasn't already pissed off. Truth to be told, he didn't know why he did what he did last night. It was stupid of him. He didn't want to drag Kanade into this. Now, alright, let's go. We're done, Saori exclaimed, leaping out of the building, a grin on her face, and arms out wide. Her face dropped when she felt the tension in the air. What's wrong? Menma being a prick again? Nah, it's nothing. Doesn't matter. They packed up their stuff and began to their travel. Most of their travel was in silence, with Kenji occasionally having to be pulled off Cage and vice versa. Menma, by the time they had reached Edo, was very tired. Not from the walking, otherwise he would be a pretty terrible a ninja, but rather from all of the stops and fights that broke out between Cage and his brother. It all just wore him out. He wasn't meant for close-quarter fighting. Most of the time, seeing those giant platinum-colored twin-gate towers would have annoyed Menma. But today, he welcomed their sight. Even those tower guards that always smelled of alcohol. Menma was tired. He remembered when he first arrived here with Ryunosuke, almost 5 years ago. The literal smooth marble streets and roads put Konoha's pothole and crack-ridden streets to shame. The streets weren't the only thing that put Konoha to shame. Edo was unbelievably clean. Not a single blemish visible. The highest buildings rose up higher than Hokage Mountain, their glass windows shining against the sun. More than once, Menma had to drag Kanade along by the arm. Edo was one of the oldest and most famous cities in the world. It was founded more than 3,000 years ago, nearly 8,000 years older than the birth of ninjutsu. In the era of the samurai and the age of magic, some of the great monuments from those times still stood, thousands of years after they were first built. The statue of the first daimyo of the country was most prominent. Its golden color, bright against the sun, the diamonds used for its eyes breathtaking. But it was an eyesore against some of the more modern buildings that Menma had designed. Its old design clashing against the more modern abstract design that Menma was so fond of. The palace of the daimyo, called the Amanukihashi or the floating bridge of heaven. The first daimyo must have been rather narcissistic, naming his palace after the place in which Izanagi and Izanami created the world. But it certainly looked the part as well, especially the newly added departments. It was as tall as Hokage Mountain itself, though not as wide. The entire thing, excluding the new additions, were carved from a giant mountain. Menma did have to admit that it looked absolutely breathtaking. The intricate artwork on the walls that stood the test of time, the gorgeous stone goddess atop the golden dome that towered over the rest of the city. Standing guard at the front of the lobby was a massive griffin made from an assortment of crystals. Mostly amethyst and emeralds, as diamonds are expensive, with rubies hard to come by and sapphires being so frail. The artist only used 2 absolutely massive pieces of diamonds. For the eyes, of course. The wings were made of sapphire while the tail and talons made out of rubies. Like the rest of the city, the statue was huge. It was about 3 to 4 times taller than most of the houses in the city. So those diamonds must have been absolutely massive. Guards were stationed at nearly every corner. There were guards at every exit. Menma was even sure he saw one of the daimyo's own fire guard samurai among them. Menma led Kanade to the citizenship registration or whatever it was called area, while Saori went off and did her own thing. The guards were all well acquainted with his sister, so they knew to leave her alone. Leaning against the counter was Ryunosuke himself. His mentor was a tall and lanky man of 6 or so feet. His black shoulder-length hair was often tied into a ponytail, as it was today. His blue eyes were sharp and deep like an ocean. Most of the time they had a cold calculating quality about them, just like Kimiko. Ryunosuke was really the only person that Menma could trust in the city, apart from the daimyo and Saori. Ryunosuke looked up from his book and narrowed his eyes at the sight of Kanade, before shifting over to Menma. "I see you're back. How was the trip?" His voice was very deep. It often stunned people to hear such a thin man speak like a bodybuilder or a massive behemoth of a man. "Pleasant, I hope?" Menma nodded, his eye turning to Kanade momentarily. "Yes, it was. There was something I really had to do." We'll talk about this thing you had to do later." Ryunosuke's voice was cold and sharp, just like his eyes. "But first, I assume you'll want to have her registered as well, don't you, Kanade?" Kanade nodded, uncertain. "Well, we'll have to sort the paperwork, but for now, all you need to do is sign these papers, and talk with one of the officials in the city." He handed her a stack of papers. "In fact, why don't you go and do that right now? Don't worry, it won't take long. This is only the initial stage. I don't think Kanade should be going around by herself." Menma voiced. He didn't trust anyone here, let alone a city official. If Kanade can't handle herself around city officials, she shouldn't have been allowed to teach young children how to properly murder each other. Ryunosuke retorted sharply. "It's fine, Menma. I can take care of myself." Menma grit his teeth and sighed. He finally relented, letting go of Kanade's hand. This was the absolute last thing that he wanted to do. "I don't trust anyone here. Menma stated, his eyes boring into the back of Ryunosuke's head. Everywhere he looked, he saw snakes, spiders, and rats. People that couldn't be trusted. People that would look at you like a hungry wolf would a doe. No, you don't trust anyone in a position of power. Ryunosuke corrected. And to an extent, you should be. This city runs rampant with greedy, power-hungry assholes, who care nothing for you, except for how much money you can make him. But you can't distrust everyone. You have to trust. You need to. I do. Menma argued. I trust you, the daimyo, and, yeah. He turned his eyes to the side, trying not meet his mentor's cold blue gaze. Listen, I know you simply want the best for Kanade. Ryunosuke sighed. Speaking of Kanade, what were you thinking? He hissed into Menma's ear. I thought we agreed that we wouldn't put anyone else in trouble. If anything happens to her, it's your fault and you will be held accountable. I know. I honestly don't know what I was thinking either. Menma looked back up at him. But I know that she'll be safer here in the snake pit than in the powder keg that is Konoha that is waiting to be lit. Kirigakure no Sato. He had seen a lot of rain in his life, but Yagura had never seen it rain this hard before. Kisame said that it was definitely an omen. The Shark Man had been around longer and had seen a lot of rainstorms as well, but none had come close to this. This was also the longest it had rained for. More than 4 straight days of non-stop pouring rain. Many members of council had suggested that it was a hurricane incoming, but it was 5 months away from hurricane season. Yagura looked up toward the dark and gray clouds. It certainly fit the current situation at hand. The horrible thought of war. Kiri was not ready. Yagura was not ready. He had barely managed to bring order to his village after the last generation of the 7 swordsmen had rebelled. His hand twitched reflexively. The burn still visible, it would be a scar that would remain for the rest of his life. Or as Kisame would say, it was a badge of honor. Looking around, Yagura spotted Shigure walking briskly towards him. A frown on her face. Yagura felt his face heat up. He didn't know why or when he started feeling this way, but Mei Terumi had said that it was normal for a boy of his age. But it was unbecoming of a king to feel this way to his subordinates. Yagura shook his head, ridding himself of those thoughts. Shigure was a member of his new bodyguards. It was suggested by Kisame that he create them, in order to replace the rebellious 7 swordsmen. There had been nearly 100 suggestions, but only one really stood out. Ryujin's blades. The leader of the blades was Shigure. She was the last of her family. The last living Kagaya, and possibly the most gifted. Her enemies called her the Queen of Bones. Her long white hair flowed in tresses down her back all the way down to just above her waist. The white cloak that signified her position was soaked. Glowing silver eyes poked through her wet hair. There you are, Yagura-sama. She called out. Our guests should be here soon. It would be unsightly for a king not to greet his honored guests. Yagura smiled, putting his hood up, as they began to make their way to the northern gates. Are you sure that we should be doing this though? What if it's a ploy by Konoha? Shigure still seemed unsure that this wasn't a cheap trick by Konoha, but everyone else seemed to be convinced. None of the countries, except maybe Iwa, was prepared for the outbreak of war. Relax, nothing is going to happen. Besides, Konoha needs this alliance. Iwa hates them, and they've been mobilizing for the past year or so. Relations with Kumo are strained because of the incident with Kushina Uzumaki, and Suna will be of no help. Yagura said, trying to reassure Shigure. Despite having the most powerful fighters in the whole village at her disposal, she always fretted over the littlest things. What if they send Arashi? They wouldn't do that. Arashi is too important to send out on missions like this, especially since that one-man village wrecking crew is running loose in their countryside. He could attack at any moment. It made Yagura wonder why Iwa hadn't made a move on Konoha yet. While both Kumo and Kiri suffered from rebellions, Suna from an economic crash, and Konoha still feeling the effects of Kirei Uchiha's betrayal and the Kyubi incident. Iwa, on the other hand, was completely untouched. No rebellions, no civil wars, no economic crisis. Nothing. Only the assassination of Onoki of both scales, and even then they recovered nearly instantaneously. Yagura's gaze wandered, scanning his village. Or rather the remnants of his village. The results of Kisame pulverizing his former teammate, Kushimaru Kurare, into nothing but the remnants of an Anbu mask. To his right, the rubble from a giant tower lay strewn about, as workers raced to finish the tower in its place. If Yagura remembered correctly, this was where Mangetsu Hizuka was cornered by his two younger brothers and killed. There you are, thank the gods. I don't think I could last another day with this moron. Speaking of the Hizuka brothers, Saito was the youngest. He wore a cloak that was as black as night over his Anbu uniform. Sitting in the booth next to him was his older brother Suigetsu, who took after their now dead brother Mangetsu a lot. Stop exaggerating, idiot, Saito retorted, flicking Suigetsu on the forehead. Yagura laughed as an audible thump could be heard. Anyways, what are you here for? This time it was Suigetsu who smacked his brother upside the head. He's here for Konoha's emissary, dumbass. Dumbass? I'm not the one who failed literally the easiest test in the whole world during our academy days. Hey, Kisame-sensei threw me the fuck off alright. The answer had been C, for the last 15 questions, so why wouldn't it have been C, for the last question? Because it was the wrong answer, moron. Maybe if you actually read the question. Shigure coughed loudly, her face twisted in annoyance. Anyways, they're in the bar across the checkpoint, Saito said, lifting his hand up halfway before having it slapped down by Suigetsu. I think they know where it is. Yagura bid them goodbye with an amused smile on his face. Though it seemed Shigure didn't quite share his sentiments. They should be doing their jobs instead of goofing off. Shigure muttered under her breath angrily. Yagura put a hand on her shoulder, calming her down significantly. Don't worry about them, they're in their natural environment. It's probably the best place for them to fight. He thought about that again. Okay, let me rephrase that. It's probably the best environment for them to fight in. Shigure nodded in reluctant agreement. The bar in question was small and cozy. It was big enough for at least 10 to 15 people. Its oak wood floors felt good on Yagura's feet and they felt smooth, as did the tables. Sitting in the VIP corner were three men. Two redheads that stood out like a sore thumb, and a plain-looking brown-haired man, who sat across from them. The plain-looking man spoke up when he caught Yagura's gaze. Yagura-sama, a pleasure to meet you. He stood up and looked like he was about to bow. Yagura raised his hands, and he stopped halfway through the bow. My apologies. I've yet to introduce ourselves. I am Sojiro Okamura. The redhead with long hair is Kage and the one with short hair is Kenji. Kage's gaze moved immediately to Shigure, his eyes moving up and down her figure. He opened his mouth, but before he could say anything Kenji slapped his back. Don't do anything fucking stupid. Kenji then stood up. We should probably do this somewhere else. Preferably your office, Yagura-sama. To which Shigure nodded. The last living Kagaya led them to his office, while Yagura himself engaged in small talk with the dignitaries from Konoha. From what he could gather, Kenji and Kage didn't get along well. It wasn't the kind of playful teasing and insulting that Suigetsu and Saito did. There was some real venom behind their words. It made Yagura question whoever chose the two of them to go on this mission together. Soon the building in which his office was stationed at appeared in the horizon. Its deep purple walls blending into the gray and rain-filled sky. Only part of it actually was above the ground. The other 75% of it was underground. Long, winding and seemingly endless hallways. The first thing that Yagura would use to describe the building if anyone asked him to. Which thankfully no one has yet to. His office was messy. Papers strewn about everywhere, stamps and ink all over the place. His chair was in the far corner of the room, all the way across from where his desk was. It was unfitting for a king to be this messy. Yet Yagura liked it this way. He actually where everything was, despite the random look of the room itself. Shigure sighed. I'll go and get some chairs. She eyed Sojiro. Unless you want to do it alone? Actually I would. No distractions, he said pointedly, looking at the bickering duo behind him, who pretended not to hear what he said. Okay then. The captain of the Fallen Blades soon disappeared out the door, before promptly reappearing with a foldable chair in hand. Thank you. As the meeting began, Yagura could feel the uncomfortable air that Sojiro was giving off. It wasn't that hard to pinpoint what made him feel uncomfortable. Shigure, why don't you keep an eye on our two other guests? Keep them entertained and make sure that they don't cause any trouble. Shigure opened her mouth to argue, but Yagura's pleading eyes made her reluctantly slip out the door. Now that that's over with, Yagura made eye contact with Sojiro. Shall we begin? I swear, that's all I know. Kimiko wrinkled her nose at the pungent smell. She loosened her grip on the man's collar and he fell to the ground, around 5 stories down. Looking over the edge, Kimiko saw nothing but a paste on the ground. Was it really that much of a fall? She sighed and jumped down to the ground, coating her legs with chakra to make sure she wouldn't end up like him. A look of disgust spread across her face. Kemari City really was a shithole. Already, she had killed at least 8 men and at least 2 women who tried to rape her. She also had to kill a gang of thugs who thought that robbing someone who just crushed a man's skull into mush was a good idea. Where would a man like you go hiding, Suzuki? Kimiko muttered under her breath, twirling a kunai around her finger. She caught several hungry looks aimed straight at her, but it seemed that rumors were already starting to spread. A white-haired beauty dressed in black who could overpower 5 fully grown men. Truth to be told, they didn't look fully grown. She could see their ribs poking out through their paper-thin skin that offered little protection to diseases that probably ran rampant in the city. It was good thing that she traded in her revealing dress for a more protective outfit. A long, form-fitting dark blue jumpsuit that blended in the midnight background. Over the jumpsuit she wore a specially designed jacket that Menma made for her. It was supposed to be able to deflect senbon, she knew that much, but Kimiko would never put that to the test. A sigh of relief escaped her lips as she entered the upper-class area of the city. She walked into a thin, tall building that rose above the sky. Stepping into the elevators, she noted the time. 1:52. It was very early in the morning, yet the lobbyist didn't question why she was so late. Suspicious. She slipped into her room and slid her sandals off with another sigh of relief. Arching her back, she felt her muscles loosen and the sound of back cracking. Music to Kimiko's ears. She felt filthy and decided to take a shower. Her shower was big, almost half as big as the one she had back home. The tiles were a powder blue that matched well with the clean white wall tiles and ceiling. She slowly slid off her jumpsuit, which stuck to her skin. The water was boiling hot, her skin turning red. Yet Kimiko relished the feeling. The feeling didn't last though as her mind wandered. I've managed to narrow down where Suzuki might be, yet I feel no closer than I did before. Her gaze turned to the clock above the doorway. There's still time for me to go and check out the last location on the list and still get some sleep. I guess I should hurry. Stepping out of the shower, Kimiko put on a black, skin-tight tank top underneath her bolero and slipped on a pair of navy blue pants. She looked out the window and scanned the city. It was just as ugly and disgusting as the last time she had been here. She made her way to the top of the building instead of going downstairs. Unfortunately, there was no way outside the building. No door, and breaking the windows would sound the alarm. Her eyes scanned the slate-gray walls and spotted a vent going up outside. Her hand gripped the cold steel of the vent latch and pulled it to the side, giving her a good look at the stars outside. The building must have been tall enough that it rose above the smog and smoke and light pollution. With a grunt, Kimiko leapt up into the vent, reaching all the way to the top in one fell swoop. Her head poked out of the vent, checking the top of the building for any possible trap or machine that could somehow detect her. Once she was fully out of the vent, she sat on the inclined roof of the building, observing the rooftops of the city. She stood up, gathered chakra into her feet and propelled herself off the roof. She nearly missed her target. Her arm reached out and grasped the cold, steel pipe outside the nearest building. Kimiko let out the breath that she was holding. She was now underneath the huge cloud of smog and smoke that covered nearly the entire city. Doing a backflip, Kimiko lands on top of a water tower overlooking a small factory. A look of disdain appeared on her face. Putting hotels next to a factory, Great thinking there. She slowly opens a skylight and silently slips in, her feet making no noise from the landing. Her head rotates a full 360 degrees, scanning the room, observing, investigating. Her ears perk up as a small faint sound echoes through the not-so-empty factory. Kimiko noticed a tiny sliver of light in the corner of her eye. She crouches behind the rusted iron railing and slowly creeps towards the light. She looks through a small hole in the wall. A smile forms on her lips. Sitting down in a chair is a man with long black hair with a stray red strand. He's flipping through a pile of papers. A scowl is present on his lips. On the table across from the man is a katana. The sound of the door opening grabs Kimiko's attention. Another man steps inside the room. Upon seeing the man, Kimiko's eyes widen and light up. Those long black locks, that arrogant smirk. It was undeniably him. Kirei Uchiha, the traitor. It seemed like it would never stop raining. That was the only sound Kenji could hear. At night when he tried to sleep in their hotel room. During the day when Sojiro worked on negotiations. The sound of water droplets dropping to the ground had been ingrained in his ears. Kenji was a little surprised that the ground hadn't begun to erode yet. A small sigh escaped from his lips. The constant rain made it hard to see all of Kiri in its probable awe-inspiring splendor. That thought brought a chuckle through his lips. Even through the mist and rain, Kenji could tell that the mist was a pile of shit. Full of poverty-stricken, run-down neighborhoods. It was well known throughout the elemental nations that Kiri had problems with poverty. It was no wonder shinobi would rather desert and defect than to stay. However, when Kiri wanted to look good, it did. Their hotel room was a 5-star. By Kiri standards anyways. In Konoha or Kumo it would have been a 3.5 star. The room was big enough for at least 3 people. 4 if they were willing to share a bed. The beds themselves were twin-sized beds, with thin fur covers and a thin mattress. Between both beds was a small wooden desk made of Mizore cedar. Wood, local to the region of Mizore in the Land of Water, near the northeastern coastline and far away from civilization. Every part of the tree sold well, and was Mizore's only important export. Kenji never understood why his village was so obsessed. Kazuma had told him that Mizore cedar is 3 to 4 times harder and denser than most of the oak and birch trees they have in the Land of Fire. Plus the Senju protect the trees of Hashirama's forest with their lives. Which is why Konoha is the leading importer of the wood. It also supposedly had magical properties, able to heal any injury. But magic was a lost art that Kenji had no interest in. Most of the room's floor was covered in a white carpet that often left strands of white onto Kenji's pant legs. Beside the beds, to their right, was a door that led into the bathroom. Their bathroom was plain looking. White on white. White tiles, white glass, with a shower head and knob painted white. That was the only thing that really annoyed Kenji. On the opposite side of the room was another door, this time leading outside to the balcony. Looking over the railing, Kenji could understand why every building was so pristine and fancy. It was the front of the city, meant to look majestic at a distance and draw people in. But after the 25th Street passed the gates? Shit. The roads were in disrepair, the buildings were collapsing, and whatever building was being constructed seemed to be using rotted wood. After the 50th Street, the houses were nothing more than tents and holes in the ground or burrows dug into the muddy and unstable ground that looked like it would collapse if someone sneezed on it. And beyond that? Well, Kenji hadn't ventured that far, and he was certain that he did not wish to either. With a sigh, Kenji walked back into the room, grabbed his jacket off the rack and made his way down to the lobby to get some breakfast. Navigating the long winding and basically endless hallways had been a chore. That was until Misaki had told him of a shortcut. Speaking of the blade, she was sitting in their normal spot. A seat in the corner next to the windows. Kenji had to admit though, Misaki was a beautiful girl. Long chocolate curls that flowed on either side of her head. She always seemed to have a smile on her face. Kenji thought that she was one of those people. Someone who smiles all the time, but never does it genuinely. Misaki was not one of those people. Her eyes lit up whenever she did smile or laugh. Sitting down next to her was Cage, who looked shit-faced. His hair tousled up and all over the place. His eyes were dead and tired, as if they weren't like that all the time anyways. In his hand was a coffee mug, which was overflowing. Kenji sat down across from him. "What's on today's schedule, Sake-san?" The girl in question grinned from ear to ear and set her fork and spoon down. Kenji nearly jumped when Misaki wrapped her arms around him and pulled him closer, setting his head down on her chest. "I'm glad you asked, Foxy." Kenji rolled his eyes. "Now, the negotiations are about to wrap up, so we have a lot to do today. So that's why you woke me up at 3:25 in the morning." Cage glared at her from across the table at Misaki, who only smiled in response. "Yep, I only woke you, because frankly you are a very heavy-ass sleeper," she said with wild gestures, hands waving everywhere. Both Cage and Kenji sighed at once. In the week that they had been there, the two of them had been run ragged, not by the politics or the greedy, stubborn politicians. Not even by fighting with each other. They were too tired and worn out for that too. No, the two shinobi, known respectively as the Wild Fox and the Electric Leaf, had been worn out by Masaki Koizumi, the third of Ryujin's blades. Every day, they visited a new monument, new attraction, or new event. Be it the Fountain of Genjutsu, the ports of Byakuran I, or the overflowing crypts of the Kagaya. Anyways, I've only got 2 more sites that we absolutely have to visit. Masaki would have been bouncing in her seat had there not been a table to stop her. Now, the first place on the list are the remnants of Deathwater. Deathwater was the pride and joy of the Kiri fleet. It is said that the first Mizukage Byakuran had died on it, while fighting in the First Great Ninja War. During the uprising of the Kagaya, Isobu, that's the 3-tailed beast, anyways. Isobu caused a massive wave to rise up from the sea, and washed Deathwater ashore. She explained, it is however in the heart of Mist Storm District though, which is all the way in the northwest of the city. It's around a 30 to 45 minute walk. Walk? Yes, because the streets around Mist Storm are. Masaki turned her head, scratching at it. Crowded to say the least. That and their buildings around for us to traverse. She seemed a little ashamed of this fact. That bit of shame only lasted for a split second, before her Cheshire Cat grin was back on her face. Moving on, her hand flew across the table, her finger pointing onto the map that the restaurant used as place mats. Our next stop is ancestral home of the Kagaya. Normally, we're not allowed to go in there but. A sly smile appeared in place of the happy grin. I'm sure that Shiger-chan wouldn't mind us taking a little trip. Old Kagaya compound. 8:12 a.m. She may have been crazy, but Masaki sure was a good host. Deathwater had been an interesting location. It was just as the Blade had said it would be. Right smack dab in the middle of a busy street. What she didn't mention was the fact that at least 5 to 6 families were using the place as a home. Kenji knew from the fear-stricken looks on their faces, that they wanted them to leave, but knew that wouldn't be able to do anything about it. So Kenji and Kage did what most of the shinobi of Kiri did. They ignored them. Masaki acted like they were the only ones there. She would bump into people and pretend as if nothing even happened. It was a little off-putting, but Kenji paid it no mind. What did catch his interest was the ship. Despite being nearly 8 centuries old, handed down from generation to generation of the Mudu clan, the ship was as large and spacious as some of the more modern trade and transport vessels that Kenji had seen docked at the ports. The wood used to build the ship was not rotting, much to Kenji's surprise. Until he learned that the wood was Mizor cedar. Once they reached the quarterdeck, Kenji got a good, solid look at the top of the ship. Deathwater's masts dominated the sky, rising above the roofs of the houses in the district. Masaki had said that there were said to be ghosts in the ship. The only paranormal experience that had occurred, however, was a wooden chest located in the captain's cabin opening and closing. There wasn't much else to see, so they continued onward to their next stop. Though it would have taken less time if Masaki hadn't stopped every 20 feet to point out another piece of Kiri history that had been lost to the record books. Kiri and Kumo, back then during the days of Princess Kagaya, were the 2 most powerful cities in the continent. Masaki was explaining. Kiri with its powerful navy, protected their trade lanes from pirates with such efficiency that nearly 500 ships a day came into the ports. Of course that was when the city was known as Nagoya. Kumo was the most powerful in the entire continent. It had the most powerful land army, advanced technology, top-tier education, great leaders, and a natural defense in the Owari Mountains. She took a breath and adjusted her scabbard. But that's not what made Kumo, or Saikyo as it was known, so powerful. The White Library did. The White Library? Kage voiced from his position in the back. Yes, there isn't a single person in Kumo who doesn't know about the White Library. For good reason too. It was built around 3,000 years ago by Toru Tanaka. During his lifetime Toru collected more than 10,000 books, ancient texts, manuscripts, scrolls, parchments, letters, and documents. Anything that had words written on it. Anything you wanted to know about was in there. Be it how to summon dragons, or something as simple as how to make a sweet roll. Legend has it that when Toru died, the entrance into the Greater Library, which held more texts and knowledge than every library in the world today, combined. During Saikyo's reign, they had access into the Lesser Library, which comparable to the Library of Tobarama. Kage finished off for her. Masaki looked at him with surprise. You're right. You know, most people never even knew that there was a Greater Library. That's because I am a Tanaka. Kage answered. After that, The rest of the way to the old Kagaya compound was made in silence. Much to Masaki's displeasure. 30 minutes of nothing but the sound of the rain later, they came upon what could only be described as a city within a city. The compound walls rose more than 30 meters into the air, and they were 3 meters thick as well. Beyond the gates, the houses of the Kagaya were well preserved, their nearly 1,000-year-old wood still intact. As with all other abandoned places, the compound was overgrown with vegetation. Weeds and vines growing and crawling all over the walls and streets. Grass growing where concrete roads once paved the way into the main city. A huge sycamore was growing where a temple or shrine used to be. Which was weird, considering that sycamores were not native to the land of water and could mostly only be found in Konoha and Kusagakure. The main attraction, however, was very clearly the giant ornate palace in the center of the compound. Or what seemed to be a palace. The giant statue of Byakko the White Tiger of the West stood guard at the entrance, its giant maw big enough to swallow a real tiger whole. Kenji figured that the reason the palace, or whatever it was built on the top of a sloping hill, was to slow down the approach of invaders. The base of the building was made of numerous rocks and pebbles. There were numerous wooden beams that flew in a multitude of directions, supporting multiple loads and providing protection from some form of attack. But Kenji could see that the castle was outdated. If an invasion were to take place now, the castle would have only lasted for maybe a week or so, depending on how tough the defenders were. The numerous narrow hallways and passageways and catwalks were just choke points waiting to happen. Walking absently-mindedly, Kenji split off from Masaki and Cage, wandering off into a different room. Standing in the middle of the room was a giant ivory statue of Byakko the White Tiger. Standing at the base of the statue, kneeling, was a woman with waist-length white hair. His eyes widening to the size of Byakko's jaw, Kenji began to step back slowly, making sure not to make any noise. Though to no avail, as the woman would turn around anyways, her piercing lavender eyes boring a hole into Kenji's chest. "You dare trespass sacred ground?" A menacing growl emanated from her chest. "Listen, Shiger-san, I didn't mean to disturb you or anything." Kenji barely had any time to dodge the white blur that Shiger had fired from her fingertip. Shiger roared and charged at him, a sharp bone protruding from her palm. Damn it, this may have ruined any chance we had at securing an alliance. Kenji palmed the wall behind him for balance and flipped over Shiger and began running down the hallway. "Get back here, trespasser." An explosion nearly blew him off his feet, but the chakra he diverted to his feet helped him keep steady. Another explosion rocked the hallway as he changed directions, moving to the right. A few feet away, the wall to his right collapsed as Shiger flew through it. Her hair waving in the non-existent wind, her bone sword gripped tightly her hand. Instead of trying to leap over her or slide and actually get stabbed, Kenji clenched his fist, tightened his jaw and threw a haymaker at Shiger, who strafed to the right. Kenji's fist blew right through one of the many castle pillars, and he dove right through where it had been, rolling onto the ground and launching into a sprint. A snarl reached his ears, but Kenji did not dare turn his head. Feeling the ground vibrate, Kenji jumped, planted his foot against a nearby pillar and flipped into the air, barely avoiding the giant white spike that cleaved the concrete pillar in half. Running out to see the commotion, Cage nearly got his head taken. Masaki, however, stepped into the bone blade, her katana deflecting the bone blade. Her captain snarled, "Of course it was you." Shiger spat, her teeth grinding, as another set of bone blades flew through her palm. "Listen, this is all a big misunderstanding." Masaki smiled nervously, her grip on her katana so tight that her knuckles had turned white. "Look, they were gonna leave as soon as we finished touring. I don't care. They trespassed onto Kagaya property and sacred ground." Shiger let out one final growl, crouching, with her bone swords crossed. Kenji's locked eyes with Cage, nodding. The other boy nodded back, rolling up the sleeves of his shirt, revealing a short dagger strapped to a hidden scabbard in his wrist. "Now stand down, or I'll kill you too." To their surprise, instead of insisting that Shiger back off and stop fighting, Masaki sighed, and sheathed her katana. She looked back at Cage and Kenji with an apologetic look. "Sorry, you're on your own." She barely had any time to step back either as Shiger rushed past her, blood in her eyes. Cage ripped the dagger out of its scabbard and parried Shiger just in time to save his own skin. Kenji rushed in and forced Shiger to back off. She growled and flung one of her bone swords like a javelin towards Cage. The bone flew through the air like an arrow and easily penetrated the pillar that Cage had thrown down into the way of the projectile. Leaping over the pillar, Shiger thrust her remaining sword at Cage. The blade ripped through the air, Cage jumping back, avoiding the hit. At the same time, Kenji flew in and threw a right hook at Shiger, who twirled around and jabbed at him. Cage propelled himself off of a wall and coated his dagger with chakra. Another bone sword protruded through Shiger's arm as she blocked Cage with one hand and punched Kenji through a wall and out of the castle with the other. Kenji slammed his hand down onto the grass-ridden sidewalk. Looking up, he saw Shiger leap from the castle down towards where he was. With a grunt, the Namikaze jumped backwards, a spray of debris appearing where he once was. When his back foot hit a wall, Kenji pushed off of it and threw a chakra-enhanced haymaker at Shiger. Instead of knocking her back like he expected, Kenji was sent flying through a series of houses before landing flat on his back. A groan slipped past his lips. Looking towards his right, Kenji spotted a figure standing atop the wall. It was Misaki. Kenji's eyes snapped towards an exploding wall. He sidestepped the oncoming barrage of bones that may as well have been missiles. "Where's Cage?" He grit his teeth, ducked low, avoiding another blinding combo from Shiger. Pumping chakra into his fist, Kenji slammed it into the ground, causing the smooth marble to uplift and throw Shiger into the air. A shine in the middle of the gray sky caught his attention. He squinted his eyes and managed to make out a dagger. Unfortunately, Shiger saw it coming and deflected it back to Cage, who flipped in midair to avoid getting run through with his own dagger. Deciding that it was time to start going on the offensive, Kenji loaded his fists with chakra and met Shiger in the air, where his fists met her blades. The air reverberated with the shockwaves that their blows made. Cage soon entered the fray, ducking under a stray swing that blew through a wall. The two Konoha ninja were nothing but blurs, punching, kicking and just striking in general. But it seemed that Shiger was slowly getting the better of them. She twisted her head around, dodging a right-handed jab from Kenji, and struck him with a kick to the stomach. Spinning around, she threw an elbow at Cage, who ducked and tried to strike at her side. For the umpteenth time that fight, his dagger bounced off her steel-like skin. The two males fell back, their backs against a wall. Both literally and metaphorically. "We can't beat her. Not in a closed environment here." Kenji, despite all of the fighting, was breathing steadily and calmly. "We also can't force her out of the compound and into the streets. Not without risking the deaths of more than a few civilians. So in every sense of the word, we're screwed. Unless Sojiro comes and has to save our sorry asses. If he's even alive. This entire thing may have been a plot the whole time. But I'll try to think positive and say that Sojiro lived and is coming to help us." Truth to be told, Kenji didn't know what to do. Shiger was one of the best swordswomen in the continent. She was a member of the Warlords, a group made up of the most powerful from each of the villages. As was Arashi. Even Sojiro were to come in and interfere, he would most likely end up dead. They were completely outclassed without backup. Kenji's eyes began darting all over the place, trying to search for a possible escape route. Scaling the walls would take too long, and if Shiger was as fast as he thought she was, then they'd be dead before they even made it halfway up the wall. However, a light bulb went off in his mind. Shiger narrowed her eyes, mouth no longer in a snarl. She held her hand near her neck and shoulder, grabbing the protruding bone. Making sure to pull it out slowly, she opened her mouth. "You were dead from the start. Trying to fight me was a mistake. One that you'll regret forever." Kenji laughed. "We'll see about that." His hand quickly slipped into his pocket and flung two kunai with smoke balls attached at the ends. Shiger cut them down with no hesitation, smoke filling the entire empty street. Shiger leapt over the walls and brought up her wrist. Lining it up with Kenji's leg, she fired a small yet deadly shard of bone. However, Kenji made no signs of showing that he had been hit before disappearing from her view. A sharp pain shot through his leg as a bone projectile ripped through his kneecap. Kenji bit his lip and used his hand to balance himself against the walls of the crowded streets. To his right, Cage pulled out a white shard that had embedded itself into his palm. "We have to find Yagura. He's the only one who can calm her down," Kenji stated, pulling out a roll of medical tape from his pouch. He scanned the crowd for Shigure's distinctive white tresses that stuck out more than their own red hair. He breathed a sigh of relief when all he could see was black, brown and the occasional blue hair that was so prevalent in Kiri. We have to stay on the ground. If we go on the rooftops she'll spot us for sure. Cage grabbed the medical tape from his fellow redhead and wrapped it around his bloody hand. At the moment of contact, the tape became red and wet with blood. Even if we could go up top, there aren't any rooftops this side of the city anyways. Looking around, Kenji could spot at least 3 buildings that classified as having a roof. Basically non-existent in a crowded city like Kiri. The 2 teammates slowly slinked around the alleyways and back roads of Kiri, blending in with the crowd, running through buildings and climbing them if necessary. Soon the giant cylindrical structure of the Mizukage's office filled up the skyline. Ryujin's palace it was called. Kenji dropped down onto the front of office, with Cage slightly behind him. A whizzing sound reached his ears. Eyes widening, Kenji turned his head and plucked the bone blade out of the air with his chakra-loaded hand. Standing a few meters away was Shigure's smirk on her face. Her skin shifted, as another bone pushed its way through, out of her palm. Without warning she charged forward. With only a split second to react Kenji jumped back. Ow! Kenji what? Sojiro began, before the explosion drowned his voice out. Yagura rushed out, his battle attire on. What's going on? Who's the enemy? When he saw Shigure, standing there, ready to launch another barrage of bones. She looked stunned and a little embarrassed. Shigure? What are you doing? Who are you fighting? Kenji looked at him, a victorious smirk on his face. No one, just a big misunderstanding. Outside of Konoha, 3:02 a.m. Sighing loudly, Kirei Uchiha took a look at Hisami who stood there in front of him. All and fidgety and stuff. Looking over his report, Kirei was a little disappointed. Not exactly at Hisami, but rather at the higher-ups. Specifically Satoshi. Grumbling, Kirei gave the commander back his report. You're dismissed. With a stiff salute, Hisami disappeared from his view. Standing up, Kirei went outside the encampment and made his way towards one of the nearby hills. It was night, but the campfires lit up the view like it was day. As far as the eye could see, campfires, tents, rebels and bandits mingling alike, laughter ringing out. But it seemed odd. Hisami had never needed an army to help him before. Why now? The night air was cold, a chill bit at his skin. Kirei paid it no mind, striding forward into the darkness over the hill. Far off in the distance he could see the lights of Konoha. An idea struck him. Quickening his pace, Kirei estimated that it would take him 10 minutes to arrive in Konoha. Stopping outside of the walls, he saw the guards. He snapped his fingers, and before they even caught wind that he was there, they were under his spell. He remembered it. The bright lights, exotic smells, and thousands of people that roamed the streets late at night. Konoha was the village that never sleeps. Looking up, and seeing Hokage Mountain, Kirei noted that Minato was still the Hokage. Despite the number of fiascos that went on under his rule. But Kirei had to give it up to the blonde. He already had the second longest tenure out of all of the Cage. After that dead bastard Onoki anyways. He sat down inside Ichiraku Ramen. There was no wonder why the place was not only still running but flourishing. It was the restaurant of the Namikaze. They always went there, be it for lunch, dinner, after a mission, you name it. Kirei was careful not to make eye contact with anyone. He wasn't afraid to be recognized, in fact he would have welcomed it. His superiors on the other hand, not so much. Over in the VIP area, or rather the Namikaze and friend seats, Kirei spotted several faces that were very familiar. He could recognize Himiko's long bright blonde locks anywhere. Kenji was hard to distinguish from the other red-headed teen that sat next to him, but that was obviously Kenji. Sitting across from them, were another pair of redheads and blondes. Arashi sat next to Akane, who was too engrossed in her book to pay attention to the conversation or eat. Beside her, and talking very animatedly, was Tsugumi. Kirei was about to leave and head back to camp when something he heard caught his attention. Just returned from a mission and I'm already on another one. This time in an even worse city. Kenji complained. Cage smirked. At least Himiko will be there to comfort you. What did you say, bastard? Kenji rose from his seat, raising his fist. Yet Cage stayed seated, his smirk growing. Nothing. At all. Arashi spoke up next, setting his glass of grape juice down onto the table. Look, this mission shouldn't take very long. Meet up with Kimiko, find out if she found Suzuki Hirano and get back home. Shouldn't really take more than 3 days at the max. Standing up, Kirei paid for his meal, and began to make his way back to camp. A smirk on his face the whole time. Returning to his tent, he packed up his stuff, and left a letter on top of his desk. Outside, he attached a note to his tent before disappearing into the darkness. Kemari City, 7 to 2 a.m. Oh, how Suzuki wanted to punch those grinning teeth. But, unless he wanted to die, he could settle for doing that in his dreams. And only his dreams. Then again, the black market dealer wouldn't have been surprised if Kirei could read minds. The man himself sat across with a wide grin on his face. After a minute of uncomfortable eye contact, Suzuki decided that it was time to open his mouth. Why are you here? To talk. Is this about that so-called immortal priest that you made join the army? Despite the fact that he worshipped a completely different god. Jashin, I think. To be honest, Suzuki didn't know whether or not having an immortal being in their forces was a good idea. Then again, when Kirei Uchiha was around, nothing was immortal. No. Kirei folded his hands together in his lap. While I was in Konoha, doing some preliminary scouting, I overheard that the Namikaze brats are after you. So, I've known that for nearly 3 years now. All the way back when Natsumi Namikaze sent one of her spies to my hideout. Well, my first real hideout. A shitty one too. Shut up. Anyways, your point? A malicious and cruel grin made its way onto Kirei's face. Now listen. Outskirts of Konoha, 3:32 p.m. Hisami raised his hand to above his eyes, shielding them from the bright sun. The city of Konoha lay sprawling over a dozen hills, a giant mountain, and a great waterfall. The waterfall, Hisami knew, was a completely new addition. He had to admit though, it probably wasn't there only for aesthetics alone. Even from his perch high up in the trees nearly 500 meters away, Hisami could hear the noise that was Konoha. It may not have the largest population, the biggest area, or the highest population density. But it was loud. The sounds of food being cooked. Vendors fighting for customers. Jonin yelling at their students. Trade carts being wheeled in and out. Deciding to take a closer look, Hisami leapt down from his viewpoint and blended into the crowd. All around him were travelers. Rural farmers with their livestock, gamblers from Tanzaku-gai, and fishermen with their boats that would prove to be useless in a landlocked city. All running from the man known throughout the lands as the Beast Tamer. He walked up confidently to the guards. Without even sparing him so much a glance, flashed his ID and slipped past into the city. It was laughable how easy it was to get into Konoha. Their guards were well trained and disciplined, but from the looks in their eyes, they were tired and irritated. No doubt from all the sleepless and restless hours of arguing with travelers that didn't have an ID. All of the gates must have been at full capacity, due to the lack of guards in the streets. Looking up and pumping chakra to his eyes, Hisami could see the faint outline of Konoha's vastly inferior and outdated chakra barrier. But the large construction project where the barrier squad building had once been, indicated that they were indeed looking to replace the barrier. And if the reports of Menma Namikaze building what could only be described as satellites, were anything to come by. Hisami stopped inside a restaurant. His blood-red eyes, which might as well have been black, scanned the restaurant regulars. Finally, his gaze settled on a fairly tall redhead who wore all black clothing. If Kirei's note was anything to go by, then this one was not Kenji Namikaze, but rather Kage Tanaka. Walking past Kage's table, Hisami lightly bumped his hip into the redhead's shoulder. Kage paid it no mind however and concentrated on his meal. A waitress made her through the drunk patrons and took Hisami's order. Throughout the course of his meal, his eyes never left Kage. Of course, Kage noticed. Dropping his chopsticks into his bowl, Kage stood up, paid for his meal before stopping in front of Hisami who continued on as if nothing happened. "What do you want?" Kage asked roughly, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. Hisami raised a hand. "Let me finish my meal first." And so Kage did, returning to his seat, eyes glued to Hisami's every movement. When Hisami finished, he simply left a couple of coins next to his bowl. Throughout the entire exchange their eyes never left each other's gaze. He had no clue why Kage decided to follow him without knowing who he was, or what he was up against. But those were things that didn't matter. Hisami led Cage around the district before stopping in an empty clearing. I'm expecting an answer, Hisami. Cage said in a low voice, a dagger in his hand. Across from him, Hisami smiled slyly. He closed his fist and began to gather chakra into his palm. Why are you here? Oh, you know why, you knew from the very beginning, yet you didn't mention a single word to your superiors. Even your beloved sister Akane was left in the dark. It was a guess on Hisami's part, but Cage's tight jaw and clenched fist told him everything. You need to leave, especially if you want to live. Who's going to make me? You, Arashi? Hisami knew that facing Arashi in a straight-on fight would be the biggest mistake of his life. Like I'm that stupid to fight him. No, if he wants to fight me, then let him. We'll fight while the village collapses to nothingness around him. Hisami smirked and opened his palm. A black character was imprinted onto his palm, a dark aura emanating from it. And you're going to help do it? Like Cage clutched his chest, falling onto his knees. A strained look appeared on his face. He then bit his lip in a bid to hold back his screams. Hisami walked forward, a sadistic smirk on his face. What did you do? It was an agreement I made with your brother a long time ago. It's time he keeps up his end of the bargain. Cage could no longer keep his screams to himself, as a dark aura began to cloud his presence. Hisami turned around, stuffed his hands into his pockets and began to make his way back to camp. What are you doing? Without even bothering to look back, Hisami yelled. Leaving you here to struggle against your unavoidable part in Konoha's destruction.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.